Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Namaste, everyone. So nice to see y'all. I don't know about for all of you, but it's rainy here this morning, which brings that very specific sense of cocooning, a certain melancholic energy. And it has its own, it has its own potency, I would say. Okay, let's arrive together. Let's find our own groundedness here in whatever way feels comfortable for you, whether it's cross-legged or feet on the floor. And allow the arms to be comfortable and allow the eyes to come to close. Again, it's not an obligation. It's not a requirement that we close the eyes. But it allows for something, this inner gaze. And then don't attempt to do anything. Don't attempt to be here in one way or another. Don't attempt to be a meditator. Don't even attempt to be the one seated in a specific way. Let all of that be relinquished and instead settle here as you are. Just the simplicity of here-ness, self-settlement. Almost as though we're leaning back into the comfiest chair or being held by a hammock. This great restfulness, settlement, not just in our physicality, but the innards of the being, getting comfortable as is. The attempter is let go of. Residing here, or rather, residing as you always are. There's a very specific intimacy with life now. And a great tasting knowing of our naturalness, our very inherent essence as swasta, as great health. All is. Feel how all is welcomed into its own natural state. It knows its own way. The body finding more softening and comfort. The breath finding its own deepening. The mind getting quieter, or at least less identification, hooking with the various images or movements of thought streams. And an opening out into the vast aliveness, that which animates, that which allows this mystery of this life, this very life, to be. Touching into the effortlessness of being alive, being. Just enjoying our restfulness here. Notice if there is that attempt or again, waiting for life to happen, seemingly living in the concept that it isn't here now. Something yearning for the happening, the movement, the momentum. And then settle back, recognizing that this is the greatest guru. This now is the greatest medicine. Nowhere that we ought to get to. Feeling another couple full breaths, this breath of life. Prana, as she naturally makes her way in and in interconnectedness offers herself out, connection to all of life. And then let's come to chant two of our prayers this morning. We'll start with the Shantipata. If you feel comfortable, bring the hands into the heart space. And as always, you can repeat after me. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Vonaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahe Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And then continuing with our Ayurvedic prayer to Dhanvantari, again repeating after me as it feels comfortable. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhanvantaraye Amruta Kalashtaya Sarvamaya Vinashaya Trailokya Nadaya Om Namo Bhagavate Namaha. Just settling there for a moment or two. Again, not attempting to find the meaning or the significance, but just for a moment basking into the mantra, feeling the power of these syllables, the sound, the nada, as it moves in its own way, coursing through all the nadis, through the channels that conduct prana, that conduct energy throughout our entire system. And then just in case we haven't done it this morning, or as a second time, let's come to open the hands out and come to gaze at the palms as we've learned in our Dinacharya, as a gift in our morning routine. Just let yourself take in the hands, the palms, as really, truly these gateways to the heart space, this giving and receiving, the reciprocity that is known here. And you can repeat after me as we remember this beautiful prayer that recognizes all of the energetics, all of the qualities of the goddesses, but really all the qualities of life itself that live right here in your palms and thus in your heart. Karavasate Lakshmi. Lakshmi is in our very fingertips, abundance on all levels to both receive and give of that. Karamadye Saraswati. Saraswati, wisdom, great Vedic knowledge, seeing of life in all of its aesthetic offerings, but also bringing art into life, creative force. This is in the very center of our palms. Kara Mule Stita Gauri. This aspect of the goddess bringing love and grace and beauty is in the very heel of our hands. The capacity to both see that, receive that, and also give that out to all beings. This too is here. Kara Prabhate Darshanam. Kara Prabhate Darshanam. These very hands are blessed. All of this exists in these very palms. Just taking your own moment for your intention, even if it's halfway through your day or it's the evening. What's your great sankalpa as you gaze to your hands as a resting place of your heart? What's your great sankalpa for this moment, your great sacred intention? And maybe for your life. Let's feel one more full and deep breath here before letting the hands come to rest down into the lap or in any way that feels comfortable. Okay, again, welcome everyone. Nice to see you again this morning. So I'm going to put you directly into dyads, 2 minutes sharing each way, a new morning ritual practice, one of the things that we've been inspired around our daily routine that you've implemented in this last week and how it's impacted you. So something that's there. And again, as I shared last week, if it's something that's not quite yet come into fruition, but you would like to see happening, then that's also something you could discuss. But if there's one thing that you were able to newly implement, then maybe sharing that with your partner, your sharing partner. So we'll come into groups. Let me look here. Okay, I will see you in 4 minutes. Okay, so at 9:24 my time, 2 minutes each way to share. Wonderful. Okay, there's everyone coming back. I hope that's helpful, to hear from someone else and also to share. We're an uneven number, so it was even helpful for me because I joined with one of you and even sharing in this way, I notice how it also amps up, a certain area that's become a bit of a blind spot for me. So what I was sharing was even what we're going to discuss now, the use of natural scents. I have diffusers all around my place, and I also have, and I'll share these with you, very specific attars that are like perfume oils, distilled oils. So I've been really using specific ones like rose and lotus in the mornings and noticing the impact of that as well. So even for me, it's really beautiful to share and to recognize the way in which when we share it together like this in Sangha, how it really just supports us being in alignment. Okay, just so everyone's aware, we will have a couple others who will hop on throughout the call just due to timings and different things. So just so we're aware that that's happening. So today, let's come to our third part of Dinacharya, sort of third and final. Now, when I say that, I want to highlight something. I'm using that term a bit incorrectly, actually. So Dinacharya, again, as I shared with all of you, means our daily routine, how we're founded in our days. So what I really mean to say is our third part of our morning rituals, because actually we're going to later discuss other aspects of Dinacharya, like the Ayurvedic clock, how the timings of the day, how we can come into alignment with them, how there's different energetics at different times of the day. We're also going to talk about Ratricharya. We're going to talk about evening routine as well, which is part of Dinacharya, of the recognition of the day. So what I really mean to say is that we're going to finish up the third part of sort of these morning rituals, the ways in which we can start our day out. Okay, but it's not that in and of itself isn't the only thing around Dinacharya. And then from there, we're going to continue a little bit in the understanding of some of the foundational arising from where Ayurveda has arisen, especially from the philosophical system, or let's say the system that recognizes how we come to evolve into this human form, which is called Samkhya. And for me, this is the first time I ever received the understanding of Samkhya, or Sankhya, as it's sometimes spelled and understood as well. It clarified so much about what it is to be in this human form. So I'm really hopeful that together we can share in depth around that in a really applied way, not in a way that's just a historical or philosophical understanding, but a true understanding of how it is that we come into human beingness, into human form. So that's sort of this morning's intention, or this afternoon or this evening, wherever you are in the world, because I know some of you are also in Europe right now. Okay, so let's come then to this document we have on Rasa about Dinacharya. How many of you, whether it's from Rasa or elsewhere, how many of you have gone out and bought yourself some new tools, got yourself some new gifts for your morning routine? Have some of you done that? Yeah, okay, good. And in each one of your countries, I'm not always familiarized with some of the places that you can receive, but in the sharing and the growing of Ayurveda, there are other companies, obviously, where you can receive some of these gifts. So some of you were writing me and asking me this week also about making your own oils. So continue to do searches for that. There's more and more beauty of recipes out there for the various things, whether it's body oil or, or Abhyanga oil or nasal oil or Gandusha oil, the oil pulling oil. This weekend, I was with some dear friends, some dear Sangha, and we were all doing many of these things together. They said, Tiffany, reteach us, remind us of some of these. So we made our own, Gandusha oil together, and they said, okay, this is really sweet. And they actually have two small children. So the 2-year-old, he also wanted to do Gandusha with us, because all the adults were walking around the house like this. So we gave him, just a little bit of plain coconut oil, and it was so beautiful to see. He was trying to swallow it, of course, but at the beginning, just moving it around in his mouth a little bit was so inspiring to grow up in that sort of framework, right? To see your parents doing that. So, as well as yoga and various things he was doing with us all weekend. So let's come then to some of the places we left off. So I skipped over these last two, or these two, 9 and 10, last week, because as I was sharing with you, we could do the oil drops and we could do the dry brushing and then the Abhyanga, and then decide to drink some water. Or as long as you've cleaned the mouth and the nose, that whole area especially, then you can drink your water. Even if drinking your water happens before you clean your eyes, but especially this area of the channel of the nose and the channel of the mouth. So you want to make sure those two are cleaned before you drink any water in. And oftentimes I'll hear from people that they're really, trying to do good for themselves. So they keep water or copper water beside their bedside table and then drink it right away in the morning. it's wonderful that we're drinking the water, but remember all that's being established and being evacuated onto the tongue early in the morning, and then we're actually drinking that back into the system. So it's best if you've done your tongue scraping, you've done your oil pulling, you've done your teeth brushing, you've done your nausea or neti before you drink water. We really want to clear anything that's been released from that channel. I'll remind you that there's a name for it, and we will go over this later in our time together. There's a name for this channel from the mouth to the anus. Does anybody remember what it's called, even in English? Does anyone remember? I just briefly mentioned it before. So the name of it, I'll put it in our chat, and we'll come to this again, as I said to you, is called, so it's called Purisha Vaha Shrota. Shrota means channel, Purisha means waste. So it's the channel, really, truly, of waste, in which everything that is waste can be evacuated out that way or evacuated out that way. And this really has to do with drinking of water in the morning, what we're doing to this channel. Monique is asking, do the copper cups oxidize? How do you clean them? Yeah, so what's wonderful with copper is that it's self-cleaning in many ways. So even though it may tarnish a little bit or oxidize, as Monique's asking, whether that's a neti pot, the tongue scraper, the copper cups as well, we absolutely can clean them because it starts to have that tangy kind of metallic flavor, increases even more. Nevertheless, it doesn't necessarily pollute the system. This is what's wonderful about copper, right? So you can clean it, and with just a little bit of salt, it's a wonderful way to clean it, or with a little bit of baking soda or lemon. So if you want to bring the shine back, like to something like this, like I just recently did this actually, but you can see the inside is a little bit more oxidized, right? Does everyone see that? That it's darker? Are you able to see that? Is it clear for you? Yeah. So I will give it a little bit of scrub with some lime or lemon. So just using half a lime or lemon, or rather squeezing some of that in some water, and then using almost like the rind with that and rubbing that on there, and a little bit of salt or baking soda, and you'll find that they'll shine right up. And then some of that oxidization will decrease, the tarnishing will decrease. So Purisha Vahashrota, that channel of waste, just remembering why we scrape the tongue as well, is because any of the undigested material, any of the material that wants to be released that way, of course, is released through stool. But any of the material, any of the amma, any of the undigested material that wants to be released this way is released onto the tongue and into the mouth. So we're already doing ourselves a huge gift through our scraping, through our gandusha, through our oil pulling, through our teeth brushing. But then also this channel wants to be flushed every morning. And so drinking water, which is what in many ways we're made of, is so important in the morning. And I can't highlight this one enough, because in our collective culture now, we drink everything but water often in the morning, right? We're drinking coffee, or we're drinking, we're immediately caffeinating. And as I mentioned to you in the last couple of weeks, you're going to notice, how many of you have noticed this already, when you increase some of your morning rituals, that you feel more awake, that you notice that some of that tamas, yeah, beautiful. You notice that some of the tamas, some of the inertia, some of the amma, the undigested material that's been bogging us down, it clears out, and immediately you're like, oh, the thing that I would give caffeine towards or for in the past is not necessarily needed. So often when we're trying to rid ourselves or to work with an addiction, which coffee similarly is an addiction. I mean, our system becomes addicted to it, or caffeine in general becomes addicted to it. We move with this pushing, this efforting energy, which rarely works, right? How many of us have noticed this also with New Year's resolutions or things like that? So we bring, more pushing energy against it. In Ayurveda, what I've noticed over the years is that actually by accessing less of this, but more of the surrendered, what we'd call vairagya energy, which provides more spaciousness, the system is naturally able to make its own decisions that are more aligned with its own nature, that are more aligned with swasta. So swasta means health. So for example, you start doing some of these morning rituals, and then you notice that you just feel less apt to grab something caffeinated. It just naturally happens that you feel less tamasic, you feel less inert, you feel less bogged down, or to move to other tendencies that are more tamasic. So when we're going to clarify all these terms, but less lifestyle habits that might be inert, unmotivated, a little bit more dark or held. For example, immediately going to social media, or immediately going to, old tendencies, old patterns of our mornings, which will then filter into our days, right? So you might already notice that you've been flushed in many ways when you're starting to do these morning rituals, and how that really determines the course of the rest of the morning and the rest of the day in many, many ways. Even now in this dyad, there was a reflection about this practice, just doing it together now. How powerful that is. How many of you notice that? Like just doing it together now. This is a beautiful practice that will really affirm something, no matter if you chant in Sanskrit, as I said before, or if you just come to recognize this. So if we start with coffee, or we're used to starting with coffee, or we're used to starting with something else, just by already doing these other rituals, you're going to notice that you'll wake up what I often call this little grace space. It's like a little space starts to enter in which there's at least a bit of awareness and then choice, right? So something's happened. You've cleared your eyes, you've cleared your ears, you've cleared your nose, your mouth, and something's happening in which there is less of this amma at the mind. There's less of the past, the undigested material of past emotional, mental, traumatic, all of this held conditioning. And we've cleared a lot of that out. And then we have a choice space. So you may not be moving as much on autopilot. And that's a space for all of us to really start to recognize and say, okay, I might still grab those things like I did in the past, the caffeinated beverages, or grab the phone to do something. But I notice that there's a little moment of awareness before I do it now, which wasn't necessarily there before. And this is a huge gift of Dinacharya. So just a little entry point for all of us to be aware of. And so beyond that, if we choose, before we might have these caffeinated beverages, to drink water, this too is a huge flush. It's a literal flush of what was in us yesterday. And it really helps that emptying out of that whole Parishava Hashrota, that whole channel, that this channel really wants to be clarified. It wants to be cleaned. And some of us, we might wake up in the morning and evacuate immediately. So let me just take a poll. Let's just, because we're going to talk about poop. How many of you wake up and poop immediately? For how many of you is that happening? So less than half of us is that happening, right? To see that, most of us classically, traditionally, people would wake up and go to the toilet immediately. This was sort of the natural movement of how things were happening. Today, so many other things are happening. We eat late, the waste channel is not clarified, it's not cleaned, we have a backup. Many things are happening for us. So no wonder if our stool is held within us, that we have to do a whole host of other things to wake up the system, like use coffee or use stimulants, or I don't know what it might be, the different habits that we have in the mornings. When we clear that out, how good do we feel? How grumpy are we when literally we still have a bunch of crap stuck inside of us? This is, to be really brash about it. You can see someone's consciousness. It was like this weekend I was sharing with you about these dear friends. They also have a 4-month-old baby. And at one point we were all sitting in the morning, just after meditation, and the baby just released. It was like, wow, it was like an adult-sized poop, we all heard it. And then his little face was amazing. It was such an example for me because he giggled, firstly, and then he just had this glowing smile on his face, after the release. And this is exactly what I'm speaking to, right? It's like after we poop, we feel good. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. Somehow elimination has become very taboo, a taboo topic to talk about, but not in Ayurveda. In Ayurveda, we're consistently recognizing the importance of our digestion and the importance of our elimination. And there are even great Ayurvedic doctors who won't see someone unless, I heard of one doctor, unless they can see someone's poop. So either someone comes early in the morning and poops for them so they can see their poop, or they bring a sample of their stool so they can literally see what's happening in their elimination. This is how important it is. I've had a few clients who have been so excited that they asked me if they could send me photos of their poop. And I said, absolutely, let's do this. So I've been able to see over time. This morning, I had someone write me and say, Tiffany, I think you should do before and after photos of faces, but also of poops. before you the first time you work with someone, and as you continue to work with them. Because she said, this past weekend, I had continuously people saying to me, what are you doing differently? You're so glowing. And she said, and I'm not pregnant. So she said, I'm continuously getting people asking this question after we've worked together for the last I think it's been 2.5 months or so. But she said, my poop is also glowing. It's like I'm having these golden poops, for the first time in my life, almost like I'm having baby poop again. So this relationship between drinking fresh water, clearing and cleansing this whole channel, and really eliminating properly is a huge, huge gift and important thing for us to consider into our days. And, there's so many things I could say about the kind of water and the type of water, but there's just a few things from Ayurveda that are suggested in the original texts and by the great rishis, by these great Ayurvedic doctors. One thing that's suggested is that we drink water, but we drink warm water. So we start the morning with warm water, not cold water. Because what's our internal temperature? Is anybody aware of our internal temperature? What it is? I mean, now we're all getting our temperature taken, right? All over the place. So are you aware of what your internal temperature is, more or less? Any guesses? Anyone want to come off mute and say?
Well, I used my thermometer and it came up at about 36.2 or 0.4.
Yes. So somewhere, like as Shandeep is sharing, somewhere usually between 36 to 37.5, somewhere in that is like our usual internal temp. But of course it changes, right? Depending upon if we're digesting, what's happening. And so it'll have that slight fluctuation. I recently had to have it taken, I'm forgetting where, but I had been bike riding. Where did I go? Anyways, and they took it and they said, oh my goodness, I can't believe your temperature is 36, but you have your bike helmet and everything still on you. So obviously, you were, so it doesn't always raise even with exercise, which is interesting to know. It's constantly finding this, slight fluctuation, but maintaining that. So the water we take internally, both in our neti pot, as I was discussing the other day, so into our neti, but also into our water, needs to not be cold, because when we put this cold water, it won't flow like the waters of our body, like the waters of our being. So we need it to be more in accordance with that water temperature, with our natural water temperature within us. So slightly above room temperature, warm, will really pick up any of the amma, pick up any of the undigested material in this whole channel all the way through and help to flush it out. If it gets too cold, the body really has to do a lot of work to digest it, to warm it up, and it won't allow for the same kind of flush to occur. So warm water, simple warm water in the morning is very important, and a good quantity, like a half a liter. Now, we're not chugging the water. This too is not in alignment with our naturalness. We're just gently sipping on this warm water. Now, considering what kinds of warm water, what kinds of water we use is quite important, actually. So here I have alkaline water, and what is alkaline water? I have tap water also, which actually here in Peterborough, I find the tap water to be one of the worst that I've smelled in the world as far as its chlorine content is just so high. So I decide not to drink from the tap water. Now, of course, there are systems that can filter and can, some of you have Santevia or zero water systems or Soma systems I've heard of as well. Various systems that can start to also purify the chlorine from the water. I can't highlight this enough. You can use systems, both filtration systems on your direct water supply in your houses. You can also use them on the tap, and you can also use them on your shower. So many skin conditions today in many of our countries are due to the fact that we're using chlorinated water, let alone the fact that we absorb, as I was speaking to the other day, this largest organ is so absorbing. And we're absorbing that chlorine directly every day when we, and fluoride and anything else that's in that water through our skin. I've had quite a few patients that I've worked with who have had skin, dermatitis or eczema, psoriasis, various things. And I have asked them to work with switching the internal water and the external water through filtration systems and noticed a significant difference. So now, even in your local health food stores, I know Marissa works for Joanne's here in Peterborough, and I know that even at Joanne's recently, I've seen this was something, you know, new. It's getting to the point where you can actually go to your health food store and get these filtration systems that can be put directly on your shower. So more and more with research, we're recognizing the impact of these waters. Traditionally, water was more alkaline than the waters we get out of our taps because it becomes alkaline both through movement and also through picking up the minerals, the alkalinity and the minerals that are over rocks. So when water moves naturally, either through groundwater or also through streams, etc., it changes the state of the water. Years ago, when I the first time I moved to or lived for some time, stayed in Oroville, which is a beautiful community, intentional community in the south of India, I was fascinated by some of the research they were doing on biodynamics and water. Really coming from the research of, have you heard before of Masaru Emoto? Any of you? I don't know if I'm spelling his name. I think I just spelled it wrong. But I'm putting it nevertheless. You can look it up. And he has a beautiful book called Messages in Water, and he's since passed. He passed a few years ago, but a Japanese scientist who looked at what happens with water dependent upon what it moves, how it moves, dependent upon the people, the beings around it. He actually looked at the relationship between our consciousness and water, how we respond to it, because we're made of water. So dependent upon the messages that are here, how that impacts our own internal waters, but how it can impact external waters. What I mean by that is he showed beautiful examples, like he would bring water into a solidified form so it could crystallize, so freezing it, and then show the formation of the crystals. And sometimes it would show that the crystals would be very muddled. How many of you have seen this before? Just so I check in. Some of you have seen this, right? So the forms would be very muddled. And then at certain times, these forms would actually be very crystalline, like a snowflake. Those of us in Canada are very well familiarized with a snowflake formation, right? So this formation would be so beautiful. And similarly, he looked at the impact upon those waters of our human consciousness, for example, if we pray above those waters. So even looking at waters like waters in the Ganga, you know, the Ganges, oftentimes people, one of the great sacred rivers in India, many beings will ask the question, how is it possible that those waters can be blessed waters? You know, they must be so dirty in so many ways. You know, it's even hard for me to say that actually about the Ganga because of the various things, you know, the various people that are bathing in it, or bodies that are actually burned in the burning ghats that are released into the waters. But actually, when these waters were studied, they were found that because there's so much prayer, there's a great alchemy that happens to that water. This is powerful to know. So waters, we can say, you know, the ancient waters of our mountains and our streams and our groundwaters, before water was privatized or water was in any way changed and gone through taps, these waters would naturally align to our own internal healing, to our own internal swasta, our own internal healthfulness. Just water in and of itself was a medicine. And we've really lost that. And so many of us have also lost our thirst. Have you noticed this? That we're not as thirsty anymore for water. It's a very interesting one. I noticed this, that it's more of a task for people to drink water now. That, you know, many children will even say they don't really like the taste of water. Why is that? We have to put things in our water. You know, there are different like drops and things you can get so that your water kind of tastes better, or so that you feel like you want to drink your water, or alkaline drops. How many of you have heard of those before? Ways we can use different drops to bring more alkalinity to the water. One of the simple ways, let me actually go grab it. Give me 1 second. One of the other simple ways we can purify, bring more alkalinity, and also high vibe our water is through the use this. So in this jug, can you see the bit of granules at the bottom that I have here? So in this jug, I've made what's called Sole, which is water with Himalayan salt in it. So I put a large crystal of Himalayan salt in it, and you put Himalayan salt into especially a larger chunk of it, not just granules, until eventually you get to the point where it's absorbed and it can absorb more. So you see how there's just that little bit still left. So I'm not going to introduce any more salt to this. And then I put just a teaspoon of this in my water in the morning. And just that, the minerals from the salt, from the sole, are excellent for remineralizing the body, for alkalinity, for various things. This is one way in which we can take, and I do this even with the water that I have, which is Kangen water. How many of you have heard of Kangen water before? It's an alkalizing, ionizing system for water, which kind of emulates the system of water going through the process of moving through streams or over rocks, things like that. It helps to increase. Of course, it would be better if we were all drinking from these natural waters, but there are ways that we can actually help to improve this. I see many of you reaching for some water because you're like, okay, we're speaking so much to it. So I notice even when I was giving that example before of children who are not feeling so much anymore, that thirst impulse, to use a little bit of sole in the water can really help with this. In the morning. So just a teaspoon of that. Another thing that I've done on this is, do you see the sacred geometry? So this is the flower of life. So again, Masaru Emoto, when he was looking at research, are you able to see it? All of you? It's beautiful how it's also reflecting from the light. So this is a sticker that a dear friend gave to me, but you can purchase stickers like this online. So different sacred geometry, like the flower of life, is very well known for its way of bringing things back into alignment with their natural essence. That this crystallized geometry is found in almost, this molecular kind of seeing or energetic seeing is found in almost all life force. And so by putting that onto the water also, there is a certain charging of the water, putting it onto a vessel or putting it under a vessel. And Masaru Emoto also saw in his experiments some of the impact of sacred geometry upon water. So Ayurveda, and I'm going on about this, but it really highlights the importance of clean, clear, and charged waters. If our body is made of, this rasa, and we'll talk more about this, rasa dhatu, the lymph system being sort of 70%, of our system is water. It's this fluidity of our being, that imagine what's happening, firstly, when we're not drinking much water. Secondly, when we're not having very great quality of water, right? When we're starving the system of these high vibrational waters. So I hope that'll just, for each one of us, bring us into more and more consideration. Marissa's saying there's a brand that has these beautiful glassware with these symbols engraved in the glass. I love it. That's so beautiful. So again, these kinds of things, I really, really would highlight the sharing on the Facebook page. And not all of you have friended me and asked me, like privately messaged me to say, can I be part of the Facebook page? Please do that. And then we can share links for all these things. And Marissa's saying she can't recall the name, but they have some products at Joanne's Place. So those of you who are in Peterborough, not many of you are, but some of you are, and she can get the name for whoever's interested. And the education around the making of these is amazing. Yeah, it's beautiful. I saw years ago in Vienna also a beautiful company that had these engraved glasswares, and even the glassware had a bit of a funnel system to it, so that when you'd pour your water in it, it was almost like the water was going through a biodynamic system. I have to share with you, I've really got tripped out many times in this life, through community, with the amazing things that people are doing to come back into accordance with some of these principles and understandings and experiments. I have a dear friend in Ecuador who created his own biodynamic water system with copper piping, with a funneling system. So the water is poured and goes through a very specific funnel, and then created an ionizing system. It took him like 4 months to design this system. And every time, and they had beautiful well water from Ecuador. Every time I would drink this water, I could feel it was like internal yoga. Literally the way in which this water would wake up the cells was very apparent, whether it's partially placebo or not, just by looking at the embedded work that went into that system. But also this water, it truly tasted so different, tasted so alive. So all of you start to consider, what are the waters that you're surrounded by? Not just what we internalize and what we take in through our shower, but even what you swim in as well. I mean, many of us are moving into fall, but even that can be so beautiful for us. So in the morning in Ayurveda, it's absolutely suggested that we start with a good dose of welcoming water into the system, flushing the whole system, and that this can really, really change the movement of our day, change our healthfulness in so many ways. And that water be like these natural waters, that it be fairly, not all waters though, nevertheless, are so warm, but that it be fairly warm to really allow this cleansing and this flushing. And it is, like I said before, that we're removing yesterday in many ways. If we are not evacuating, what's happening is that we're holding much of what was there and left over from yesterday, not just in physical form, not just in the waste of our food, but also in mental, emotional form. So really cleansing the body with that water. I see that Shandeep is asking, do you recommend adding lemon to the water, morning water? So here's a couple other things that are suggested in Ayurveda. Absolutely, as Shandeep is asking. So the first one is clean, clear, warm water. That's the first thing. But the second is something called Tamra Jal. Tamra Jal. I'll write it for all of you, but it's also in this document. You'll see it actually. Let me go to it again. So Tamra Jal is, oh, it's not in the document. It just says in a copper vessel. But if you click on that, you'll find more about that. And we have 2 different copper vessels that we have at Rasa. So let me put here in the chat. Tamra Jal literally means, Tamra is copper and Jal is water, or Jala, Apas. Both of these words are used for the element water, which we're going to go over next week together. Jala and Apas. So that's the Sanskrit word for water. So this Tamra Jal, this copper water, is not just that we put water into the copper vessel and drink it. It's that we leave it there to actually absorb some of the copper. So we leave it overnight. Now, how can you make it warm? That's the thing that I often get asked. So what I often do is I'll fill this to about 2/3. And then I'll take some hot water from the kettle, some of my alkaline water, and I'll top it up the other third. So that one hasn't been copperized, let's say that, but it's made it warm copper water now. See, in India, the water would be room temperature to a little bit warm, or it is often, unless we're in northern India. But for many of us, like even this morning I already drank from, I've refilled it and it's quite cool. It's kept it cool. So we have to introduce some warm water to that. Copper water has so many various benefits. It's so powerful to start to use copper water. And the great rishis knew this, so they would speak to using various copper vessels. The other thing that we have, these are beautiful because they're also hand hammered. So we work with artisans in northern India and they hand hammer this. So this gives you a way also to have a larger amount. So you can also, what I'll often do is soak this fully overnight and then pour it into a glass and add a little bit more, or pour it into this one and add a little bit more of hot water in the morning so that it's warm in the morning. A question I often get asked is, can we have too much copper? So copper and zinc have a relationship between each other. And if we introduce too much copper in the system, it can steal zinc a bit. So because of that, I say it's wonderful. Unless you have a zinc issue, unless you have a zinc concern, there should be no challenge with that. Nevertheless, not all of us are getting zinc in our foods, or not all of us are able to maintain proper zinc levels. So in that case, just drink 1 of the copper in the day. If you want to refill your bottle and just drink it like that, it's not really copper. It's not going to be copperized if it's just been sitting for half an hour and then you're drinking it. Does everyone understand what I mean by that? If you keep it overnight, it's really going to have a high density of copper. But if you're just using a bottle in that way, it should be fine. Preeti is asking, searching for an authentic copper neti pot and bottle glass for drinking copper water and copper tongue scraper in India. If you know a source and recommend in India, please let me know. Yeah, I will think about that, Preeti. The factory that we work with, the artisans that we work with, I don't know if they do just simple retail, but one place that I've often seen all these things retailed is in Rishikesh, and there's a store in Rishikesh, the Agar Walls Neti store, I think they call it, in Rishikesh. What I could actually do right now, Vibor. Oh, this is when you get everything linked. Let me look here for a second. Okay, here we go. I'm going to put for you, Preeti. This is Vibor's phone number. Okay. So I was able to pull that from WhatsApp right now. I like being technologically sound somehow. It allows for certain things to flow. So you can work with them, Preeti, and see what's possible there. Shandeep asked, I see a film on the copper water and wonder if this is safe. So like a film that forms on the top of it. I think that, so that shouldn't really be happening. That's probably that some kind of microbe has gotten into the bottle or into the water or something like that. So not usually should there be necessarily a film on it. Then make sure that you're giving your copper vessel still a wash every day. So drinking out of copper vessels, it not only is even more cleansing, so it wakes up peristalsis as well. It can help with elimination. It helps also through osmosis. It helps with joint health, with skin health. It helps to cleanse the liver. It's also known for benefits that it has to the brain, so that it can really wake up and help with some of the gray matter in the brain. It's powerful what can happen with copper. And Jessica was asking, do we just assume the water we are using needs to be purified, or is there something specific to test? It's an interesting one. You can get your water tested at a third party. So if you're like pretty established in your house or your apartment, wherever you are, just look up a lab in your city that tests the purity of water, and make sure that it's not a governmental source, because of course they're going to tell you that the water is good and it's clean and it is what it is. Of course, you can find also, there are resources online, like I was looking it up yesterday, about Peterborough water. You know, what the government says about Peterborough water, what the alkalinity is, what all the minerals are in the water, the chlorine content. So of course that is there, but you can also look for a third-party testing. You can also just get litmus strips, so pH strips, to test not just your own urine and your own saliva to see what your alkalinity is in your body, but also to test your water. So that can all be very interesting to do and to test. The mineral content in the water, also very powerful. You see, it's well known now, and with much research, it's known that if we keep the water above a 7, or if we keep our bodies, let's say, above a 7 pH, it's very hard for the system to develop dis-ease, to fester things. So the microbiome is kept at a natural balance. Much of the system can be kept in its own healthfulness if we stay in that pH above sort of a 7. And so if we introduce waters, if we introduce foods that keep us in that alkaline ash, then this can be very helpful. And copper water naturally alkalizes water as well. So it has so many different benefits. And actually, if you go onto the website, you will see, I don't know if I can click. Yeah, so it clicks me through, okay, to our copper water bottle. And then we've placed here various benefits that are there. So I find even for arthritic conditions and for skin health, I'm just amazed continuously for skin health, which obviously shows us something, that ama is being cleansed out of the body, and thus we're starting to glow from the inside out in many ways. Immune system, you know, I'll often suggest today copper water because of its the way in which it's antimicrobial, it's antifungal, antiparasitic, and the way in which it can improve the immune system for those of us who are concerned during this time of whatever we're calling this, whatever is happening, just to boost our immunity as well as that whole stimulation of the digestive and eliminatory system. So you'll find that link also on the website. So this is lots about water. Now, Shandeep asked about lemon in the water. So another way that we can increase alkalinity and also cleansing impact is by putting lemon. Now, how many of you knew that lemon actually, or lemon in water, when we ingest it, when we ingest lemon and lime, citrus, actually becomes alkaline? Yeah, some of us know this, but a lot of us think citrus is acidic, right? So we immediately think it must be acidic, but actually what it does is it creates an alkaline pH in the system. So when you introduce a squeeze of lemon, a squeeze of lime, or of apple cider vinegar, you know, I'll often suggest that because, for example, here in Canada, lemons come from, you know, sometimes I will get an organic lemon from South Africa or something, you know, and this is really not so in alignment with localization, with seasonality. I feel it's not necessarily important for me to get a lemon in January. And instead, I would use something like apple cider vinegar, which is made locally. Like I have an apple cider vinegar that's been made, you know, 2 hours away and comes in a glass bottle. So in that way, an apple cider vinegar can last a significant amount of time because you're only going to use about a half a cap. And again, it will increase the alkalinity and will increase the flush that happens in the body. You will notice if you do this in the mornings, again, it will up the ante on how clear, clean, cleansed you feel, and it will immediately promote also evacuation. For those of you who have difficulty with evacuating in the morning or evacuation in general, starting to follow some of this, starting to just consider the source of water, drinking the warm water in the morning after you've done your rituals, adding lemon or doing something that alkalizes, like using the copper, all of this starts to change things significantly. And all of us are drinking now. We're drinking something, right? I'm noticing. Jess has grabbed her copper water bottle. So all of us may be doing that. And again, I want to remind you to sip. The body digests and absorbs much better if we're sipping rather than if we're just chugging it. Many of us are trying to get it in, right? So we're chugging right away in the morning. Now, what you don't want to do, so one thing, so everyone make sure you're listening right now. You do not want to put lemon into your copper water. So did everyone hear that? I just want to make sure that everyone heard this. You do not want to put lemon into your copper water. What will happen is this will create a natural emesis, which means it will make you vomit, or it will make you extremely nauseous to the point that you'll be holding it back. Let's say it in that way. What it does is there's some kind of chemical reaction that happens between the water and the copper that the body just, it really stimulates this sense of emesis, the sense of vomiting, so, and nausea. So don't introduce, there was, what happened a few months ago, Lisa was here, beautiful dear friend, and also the operational manager at Rasa. And I had been cleaning a new copper vessel. So I had water in it, but I had put some lemon in it also to soak for a couple days to clean it out. Okay, so it was sitting beside the water jug. And she just assumed it was copper water. So she drank it down. She's at my house. She's like a sister. So she drank it down, just assuming she knows me. And it was a new one. And usually that's true. I would have one there. So she drank it down and she got in the car. She was driving and she called me about 10 minutes out and she said, I'm really sick. Do you think we got food poisoning from last night's food? What do you think? She said, I've thrown up like 4 times. I said, on the side of the road. And I said, what's going on? And then I went to the kitchen and I was looking around and I thought, was it the food? But I'm not feeling sick. And then I saw the copper vessel beside the sink and it just sparked. And I said, honey, you've drank, really charged copper water that's been sitting for a few days with a whole heap of lemon I put in it to clean the copper vessel. So she said, okay. So she was completely fine afterwards. It's absolutely fine. If you want to have a good emesis, it will actually help you. And that's actually a practice in Ayurveda, but not if you don't want that every single day. Exactly. As Preeti's saying, this is called vamana or vamana. So vamana dauti is a cleansing through emesis, which is okay, but every single day, I don't necessarily want to be promoting that for all of you. Okay. So this is lots about water. If you're going to have lemon water, let it be separate warm water that you take out of another vessel that hasn't been copperized. Okay, is that making sense? Any questions about water? I really wanted to go over this because this topic in and of itself could change each and every one of our lives and the lives of people around us. Let alone us starting to get more clear about our requesting of our governments about healthful, clean waters again. The privatization of water has changed things a lot in our countries and in our health as a society as well. So, and fluorides in our waters and all of the things that are being introduced. So getting more empowered around our water and starting to drink water every morning is so powerful. Any questions about water? Okay, so then the hope is once the water has happened, see if I can go back. There we go. So once the water has happened, hopefully, if you haven't already evacuated right away in the morning, you will then evacuate. And evacuation is so important, again, from clearing this channel, for welcoming the day, welcoming the newness of the day, coming fresh into our days. It's so important that we evacuate first thing in the mornings. So if you have a struggle with evacuation in the mornings, there's a few things I can highlight to you. One is start doing all of the different rituals just by stimulating, for example, the nose, because the nose, we'll talk about this later, is related to excretion. It's related to the excretory organs. When we clear with neti, you might feel that you have to evacuate. It's very interesting. Or you put a bit of nausea oil and you feel that you're clearing and cleansing this area. You might feel that you also have to poop. Have any of you had that experience yet? Has anyone had that? I'm just curious to know if that's happened for anyone yet. Any relationship between cleaning your nose and pooping for anyone? Okay, well, for some of us, it can actually. You start to clear here and you'll feel that you start to clear there. So generally doing all of those can help. Then the water can help as well. But beyond that, oftentimes we're missing evacuation because we're not slowing down, because we're not giving space for it. So again, I'm always going to share with you different examples I have from people I work with. I had one woman and she had been dealing with constipation for 25 years and she was a goer, or she is a goer and a doer. And I said, okay, give me an idea of your morning ritual. And she was even doing all these things, but she would chug her water and then immediately she would move into doing, making breakfast for the kids, getting out the door, doing all these things. And so she wasn't giving it a space. And I said to her, I need you to just sit on the toilet. So I need you to get a squatty potty and just sit there for 7 minutes and remain unmoved. So don't go anywhere. Don't be on your phone. Don't be doing anything on the toilet. I want you just to sit for 7 minutes and see if anything happens. And even if nothing happens, this is going to become your new sitting on the toilet ritual. You're just sitting there. And so a squatty potty, how many of you have heard of squatty potties before? Heard of this? It's so great now, when we come together in this way, many of you are already, have heard of these things. So squatty potty, you can even buy them at Costco, I've heard now. It's a little stool that raises your feet. So you're actually in more of an ergonomical the body is in a position, an anatomical position, so that the anus and the colon is more aligned. You see, we put a kink into the bowels and into the intestine when we sit on a throne, the way we sit. And so this brings a lot of laxity, actually, and we have to push much more, which contributes also to hemorrhoids, and it also contributes to a lack of full evacuation. So for many of us, what will happen, and then I'll come to you, Anna, I see your hand, is that we're not fully evacuating. So we feel we evacuate, but some get still stuck inside of us. This whole relationship of sitting on something is doing exactly that. So when you start to squat, I have a very funny story to tell you. So years ago in India, there's really interesting systems because they want Western toilets. So Preeti can probably highlight and know about this now as well. They want to have Western toilets with Westernization and globalization. So they have throne-like toilets, but then they have these really neat, on some toilets, seats that come down that actually have footholds, footsteps. Or sometimes you'll lift the seat on the toilet and the toilet bowl is widened and actually has like little ridged areas where you can put your feet. So basically you can decide whether you sit or you squat on the toilet. Okay, so it's both, which I think is brilliant. And I would love to have in my own bathroom for those who choose to squat and for those who choose to sit, right? So both are there. So I was really getting used to the benefits of squatting. And I used to deal absolutely with oscillation between constipation and diarrhea before the gift of Ayurveda entered my life, and especially constipation or not full evacuations. And so I was really happy to be in India at this point. I'd been there for maybe 3 years pretty consistently and enjoying squatting and squatting toilets. And I was in a hotel in Rajasthan. I'll never forget this. And they didn't have a squatting toilet nor this option. And I said, well, I'm light, I can do this. It's okay. And it wasn't a particularly clean bathroom. And so I thought it's okay. So I got up with my chappals, with my sandals to squat on the toilet, and the toilet wasn't screwed down. Okay. So the toilet wasn't screwed or whatever. I don't know anything about plumbing, but what happened was the entirety of the toilet and all of its plumbing fell over and the toilet smashed. I never knew that was possible either. So the toilet broke into pieces, okay? And I'm left there standing, my feet in water and leftover things and a toilet smashed, and I'm in this hotel. in their, it was really their restaurant bathroom. And so I had to go downstairs and excuse myself for all that I had learned in India and Ayurveda and pay for a new toilet for them, obviously. Right? So these are the kinds of things that happen. Ida's able to join us now. These are the things that that happen if we really start to love our squatting. So make sure you take care with your own toilets to make sure that they, you know, you're using a squatty potty or you find another system. But with many individuals, including this woman that I'm sharing with you, she started to do this 7 minutes a day and she started to poop every morning. It just required the space and the squat. So I said, we're going to do squatty potty and you're going to stay there. So many of us rush through it or we're not squatting. And this is really impacting how much of this amma, this undigested material, this toxicity stays within us. And the colon is one of the most absorbing areas of our body. And so what will happen is any of the things, the parasitic, microbe activity, any of the kind of, you know, yesterday's waste that's held in our stool that doesn't pass through the body is reabsorbed into our system. And imagine what that's doing to many of us. So proper evacuation is so, so important. Preeti is asking, squatty potty is to convert a Western toilet to an Indian toilet. Basically, Preeti, but not, it's not as beautiful as that. So what happens is it slides under the toilet where we have that narrow part and you put your feet on it. So at least your knees come up a little bit more. So it's as though you're sitting on a toilet a bit like this. So your knees are coming up a little bit more. It's not like really being in a squat. So in true squat toilets, you're really up more. All your weight is on your feet. And something happens with that. It's an asana. So the other thing I want to highlight to all of you is if you have evacuatory issues, is one, maybe converting, getting a squatty potty, giving time to sit on the toilet, drinking your water beforehand, or to squat on the toilet, but also to do malasana, like to do a squat. So this is malasana, to sit like this. How many of you know this asana? So squatting like this, sitting like this, or squatting like this, even for a couple minutes in the morning can be really, really important, just to, you know, let alone all the impact that it has on the body, the hips, various areas in the body. So giving a good squat to the body every morning. Many of us are not even able to squat anymore because we don't get low like this. We don't do this. You know, in India, as Preeti would know also, many women are cooking and doing things around the house like this, sweeping, cooking. So there's a constant massage that's happening to the intestines. We rarely do this, right? Everything, our chairs, everything that we use keeps us in this position that will definitely bung us up in various ways. So, so it's really important to consider those few things, either squatting on the toilet or squatting away from the toilet as well. What did you want to ask, Anna?
Sorry, I just wanted to ask you about the Kangen water, because I know it's multi-level marketing and it's really expensive.
Exactly.
So is it really worth it?
Yeah, I think that that's a question that I ask myself as well. So I get free Kangen water. I fill up a jug of Kangen water from a friend. So that's why I benefit from it. But I haven't actually bought the Kangen system. So I know that there are alternative systems to Kangen, and that might be something that we collectively look at and share on the Facebook page as well, Anna, because I have the sense that it is multi-level. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means that that everybody is making some money off of it as well. So with that, I don't know about other systems, and we'll have to look into it and see what other systems there are. At one point, I had not a cooler, but a dispenser from this place in Oroville that was studying the biodynamic water. That was amazing. So let me share this with you. This dispenser, firstly, was like a Santevia dispenser, if those of you have seen it, that had rocks, carbon, different things that would filter and mineralize the water. But it also contributed, so it moved the water. It also offered blue light to the water. And at the same time, it would give the vibratory chant of the Gayatri mantra, but in its vibratory impact rather than the sound of the mantra. So you didn't hear it wasn't like the thing was emitting the chant, but rather they had somehow encapsulated the vibration of it. And so that would enter into the water. So you were drinking water that had this Gayatri mantra basically in it. There's so many different fascinating systems out there. I can't get one of those shipped here. So I had that in India, but there are many systems. So let's look into it. Shandip is asking, do you recommend drinking triphala every evening to aid with elimination or occasionally? Yeah, so triphala is a beautiful combination of 3 fruits, triphala, but it's not necessarily sweet. How many of you have tasted triphala before? So those of you who have, you're like, yeah, it doesn't taste like fruit, that's for sure. So triphala, I suggest for many of us, and Dr. Ladd will often say this, he'll say, you know, that it's something that all of us can benefit in taking daily, especially with the amount of amma, the amount of pollution that can be in our waters and in our airs and things like that. Nevertheless, I do most of the time ask people to go off triphala once in a while. So for a couple of weeks or for a month, so say you take it for 6 months in a small dosage, because triphala, of course, it's not habit forming, but of course it is an introduction of something. Nevertheless, I like to take triphala most evenings. So, you know, we can take it consistently. It's not a habit forming laxative or anything like that. It helps to balance digestion and elimination as well. And in a small dose, just 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon in warm water just before bed, it's a wonderful way to help with elimination and clear the system as well. And those 3 fruits, each one of them has a prabhava, it has a specificity of balancing one of the 3 doshas. So it's tridoshic. The only thing is in excessive usage, if someone uses higher dosages of triphala, or they are using it constantly throughout their life, or they're using it multiple times throughout the day, it can sometimes create internal dryness. So this is why with all of this, I love to see the specific individual that we're working with, but it is something that I usually generically can say, all of us could benefit from 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of triphala every single evening in a bit of warm water, followed by a bit of a chaser of water, because it is quite bitter, sour. And so if you chase it with a bit of water, you're going to feel, oh, that's a bit more sweet, and I've got that taste out of my mouth. Sequoia is asking, can you use a stool, example, a block of wood, and rest your feet on it so that your knees are higher than the toilet? I think that, yeah, because the squatty potty is basically a stool. Yeah, I think that could probably benefit Sequoia. It could at least benefit better than having the feet down. But even if you can get a bit higher than that, like if you can get a stool that really raises the feet. So I've seen a few people have made these kind of squatty potties or stools as well for their toilets. So that's an option. And Preeti says triphala with honey is a suitable combination. Usually we don't always suggest triphala with honey, Preeti, but sometimes we use it when we need a little bit more of a carrier of warmth or a protector, like an anopana that's protecting, or ghee to protect from dryness. We can do triphala ghee is sometimes something that we can take absolutely more in the day right before bed. Sometimes I find that it's a little heavied in someone's system. So I might do a triphala ghee earlier in the day before a meal as well to help with the benefits of triphala. Yeah. We also sometimes use triphala ghee even in the eyes, as I was sharing with you before last week. So the last thing with evacuation that I want to highlight also is how we clean our bum. So I don't know if I've really shared this in past classes, but I've become more and more inspired about this because recently, how many of you have heard of toilet bidets? Like something you can put onto the toilet that becomes a bidet. You know, when I was growing up, a bidet sounded like something that rich French people had, right? So Monique is on our class. Monique, I forget if you're from Belgium or where you're from, but it was always like, you know, that's for rich French people. They have bidets, you know, we don't have bidets, and it's a separate thing. So exactly, Rue is writing down, there's one company from the States called Tushy, Australia, but you live in France. Okay, Monique, yeah, clear. So Tushy is one such company. I got mine locally from Home Depot here in Peterborough because I could get it quickly from a Home Depot. It's not as pretty as a Tushy, but I really like it because it has 2 settings, not just for the bum, but also for the yoni. So the spray moves slightly different depending upon if it wants to go towards the bum or go towards the frontal, the yoni or the vagina. So I use this thing consistently, and you can get some of them where they hook up also with a little bit of warm water. There is a technique in both yoga and also in Ayurveda called Mula Shodhana Dauti. And as Ida is saying, every place in Turkey has it also. And in India, you have this as well. Either you'll have a butt spray or you'll have you'll have a lota, which is something, it's like a bucket with a smaller bucket, and then you wash the anus. So you'll wash the area with your left hand. So you'll pour it in and wash the entire area. Or there'll be something on the back of the toilet that can actually be like one of these sprayers. Many countries have these. And it's funny that many of us have lost the knowledge of this. So what we're doing is we're just wiping, and we can never truly clean that area. And there is so much bacterial, microbial, parasitic activity that can stay on the area of the anus and continue to fester and travel in. This also contributes to hemorrhoids, fissures. This fecal matter that stays there is, of course, contributing to us having more ama, or having more toxicity in our systems. So mula shodhana dauti, mula shodhana, means the cleansing of the root. So the purification of the root. Dauti means cleansing. Mula means root. Shodhana means purification. So this is a cleansing by the purification of the root. And it's known that by cleansing our root, we're not only cleansing that final channel and helping to cleanse the evacuatory organs, but we're also helping to cleanse anal retention, literally. We're helping to open up that area. If we retain stuff in that area, if we're retaining, clinging, resentment, stubbornness, all those kinds of things can start to be cleansed. So whether you do this with a little spray, or you do this with a little water beside your toilet, or even if you're wiping with toilet paper, and then in your shower, you really make sure that you're cleansing the area. But still, if we're going to the toilet more than once a day and we're not necessarily showering directly afterwards, it's interesting to note how much fecal matter is still staying in that area. So mula shodhana dauti, and getting one of these, I think the one I got was under $100. It was like $70, $80, easy enough to install. I couldn't install it. I'm sure I could have, but I would have done something like what I did in Rajasthan. So my mom's partner, my stepdad, came over and he installed it for me, safe zone. And while he was installing it, he looked at me and said, "All the things that I've learned by helping you." He was just laughing. He said, "Okay." And then they tried it out. And I said, "Don't you want one?" So this bidet, actually, when we first tried it, it was so cute because it sprays so strong. It sprayed entirely across the bathroom. So you have to be careful, to check them out. But using a bidet or washing in the area is the final thing I wanted to share around evacuation. Okay. So these are the things around evacuation in our mornings. Let's touch on the rest, which is a little bit more self-explanatory, where there's a couple things I want to share there. And then we'll come to a break. So after evacuation, after we've done our abhyanga, especially, we talked about letting it soak in. So letting the oil soak into the body, we want to bathe. So snana, we want to have bathing each and every morning if possible. Now, some of us are more used to bathing in the evening, but I again want to remind us that the body at night is digesting, it's even sweating a little bit, right? And that sweat, that mala, it's releasing much of the waste that might be held physically, emotionally, mentally. So bathing in the morning and bathing after abhyanga is quite important, actually. So if you can have a gentle shower or something in the mornings, this is an important start to the day. It will freshen and again, release yesterday, release any stuck held things, and allow us to move into the rest of our day with that freshness. So just as I mentioned before, considering the waters that we're bathing in is very, very important. Preeti said, regularity of time, sitting on toilet seat at the same time for 7 minutes helps. Thank you so much, Preeti, for saying this. Yeah, and asking this. If I heard you clearly, just checking. So not just that we sit for 7 minutes, but the regularity of these things helps so much. It's just like meditation. When I say to individuals, choose a place, choose a very specific seat in your house where you're going to meditate. Make sure that you're not wearing your pajamas and meditate at the same time every day. What starts to happen is we build up a response in our system that says, and it's time to meditate. And that becomes cumulative. So it definitely becomes this cumulative response in the system where we drop in much more quickly. So the same with the evacuation. Absolutely, Preeti, that we do it at the same time, if we can, the same time each and every day. So with the bathing, just checking what the water source is, and as I mentioned to you the other day, It can be powerful for us to switch from, now we've done all these beautiful things. Don't introduce chemicals. Check your body washes or your shampoos, your conditioners, the various things you use. I like to use things really from a zero waste store as well. So refills into bottles, so we're not necessarily contributing to more plastic, things like that. I know many of you are well versed in these things, but definitely looking for the most sort of zero waste, not only in their packaging, but also in their content. So the least chemicalized. Recently, we had someone with eczema, a client with eczema, who we figured out that the main cause of what was happening was a fabric softener. So the fabric softener he was using in his clothes was contributing to the eczema. It's amazing to see. We get comfortable with these things and we don't really think about how we're impacting and how we're digesting all of this. There are studies that show that most women, by the time they leave the home in the morning, will be exposed to over 2,000 chemicals. Through our makeup, through the things we use in the bathroom, through our cleaning supplies, through our dish detergent, through all these different things. There are hundreds of chemicals in these. And these are endocrine hormonal blockers. These also will bring an askewness also to the nervous system. Of course, we're digesting that. And what's that doing to our digestion, our skin? So there's so many ways in which we can also clean up the environmental toxins in our homes and in our bathroom. So do a little checklist. That's what I would say. Check your bathroom. Like, what am I using as far as even the toilet paper? If you're using toilet paper that has scent in it, it has a whole host of chemicals. And you're putting that near your tushy and you're putting that also near your genitals. And, we have a rise in various forms of cancer and all of these things. Of course, there's an absorbing that's happening. So I don't want us to become fear-based, but it is important for us to kind of check some of these things. And so similarly, the soaps and various things that we're using, as I said to you last week, oil in and of itself is very cleansing. So when you introduce the hot water with the oil, just that wiping can be cleansing enough. But if you want to cleanse the body a bit more, what was traditionally used was things like ubtans. So you remember, I was sharing this last week. Does everyone remember? I'm looking over here because your videos are there. So ubtans are like a powder. So I'm going to show you, and you can make these yourself as well. This is our Vata ubtan. As soon as it becomes fall, I use our Vata. In the summer, I use our Pitta ubtan because I have more sort of a Pitta Vata skin combination. This one's beautiful. I can just smell it even now. So this has a combination of coconut milk. It's got oat flour also in it. And then it's got a whole host of things. I formulate all of these and I don't always remember. So we also have a Canadian gray clay, Moroccan red clay. It's got ashwagandha, elderberry, sea buckthorn, lavender, orange, and angelica and geranium. These are amazing combinations of things. Now, as I said to you last week, you can use this dry on the body, but you can also mix a little water in there and then wash. Wash the body or wash the face. We're not scrubbing hard. We're just gently releasing and letting go of any debris or any kind of toxicity that might be held on the body or the face. I have noticed a real improvement in my skin, but also in so many individual skin when they start using ubtans rather than other facial cleansers. So ubtans are quite a powerful one for bathing. Or using a natural soap that has an oil base as well can be quite powerful. The other thing you can do, as I mentioned last week, was just have powdered chickpea flour, mung bean flour, and those you can keep a little pot of also in your bathroom. The first time I used mung bean flour, I was just, again, wowed. It was just simple mung beans ground. And I was given that by a friend that she said, wash with this today when you shower in India. And my skin, for the first time, I could feel the way some of the heat was released on it. I have a history of really dealing with acne. Any of you had that before? So since I was actually about 11 or 12 with hormonal changes, I started having acne mostly on the back and the shoulders. And it was something I was plagued with as a young adult. And I would never wear tank tops or dresses or anything like that. And I started to use Besan. I started to use chickpea flour with rose water. And before that, my mom, I remember, was buying so many different products for me. Of course, a mother wants to help in so many ways. Natural products, other products, I was using all sorts of things, doing peels, whatever I could do. And just the simplicity of that started to release some of the heat and change what was going on in the skin. So, of course, other things internally as well. Preeti is sharing something you would love to see, Tiffany. So she's given me a link. And she's saying that it's a lovely skincare, hair wash, clothes, and dishes powder ranges prepared on principles of Ayurveda. Beautiful. So please share all of these things in the page on Facebook. I really, really would love all of you to have as many resources as possible. And so when you're showering and bathing, don't think that you need to scrub your skin down. And that's why even the chlorine, often what it does is it rids the body of the natural oils, which actually protect us throughout the day. So Abhyanga, you want a bit of that oil to stay, and you want to just gently wash off any kind of toxicity that it's helped to release from the body, and then pat yourself down afterwards. And the same with the hair. As you start to naturally, internally have more sattva, more purity, more balance, you're going to notice that also there'll be more balance with the hair. And if you use less stripping products with the hair, so even how many of you have tried no poo before, no shampoo? Have any of you tried that system before? Where you do like apple cider vinegar and baking soda and you kind of, or you try no shampoo. There's different systems that are out there. But what I can say is, even if you're going to use shampoo, conditioner, things like that, if you do hair oiling, which I mentioned Abhyanga last week, I suggest doing hair oiling once a week. So we have a hair oil. I'm looking for, I grabbed a couple things. So we have a hair oil in a similar container like this, but it's not there. This is another company from Young Living. I get one of their hair oils as well. So, it could be your own hair oil, and you do it once a week, massaging through the entirety of the head and the hair. And then you wrap the hair and let it stay there for a few hours. You're going to find that you won't need to condition very often, because usually conditioner is used because we strip the hair. So we're using a shampoo that's stripping the hair of products and various things that we've used or toxicity that's on the hair, pollution, and then we have to recondition. But if you oil the hair once a week, and then you just use a gentle shampoo once or twice a week, you're going to notice that you won't need to shampoo and condition more than that. Now, of course, if we put product and other things in our hair, you might need to, but you can really try to play with this more and more. And you'll notice that you need to strip the hair much less and condition it much less. Shandeep has said, I've been using the shampoo bars from Joann's, which I love. It's so nice not to have any plastic bottles. That's a beautiful contribution as well. So you can get little shampoo bars. So they're pressed bars. How many of you have seen those before? So again, it's oils, might have different essential oils. And I love using those. They're also really convenient for traveling as well, right? Another thing is there are hair wash powders, just like using the mung bean powder. I've gone through phases where I just use the mung bean powder to wash my hair, actually. Of course, you have to rinse well as well, but it takes out a bit of the oil, and then your hair is naturally able, especially if we're washing or swimming in natural waters, there isn't much we need to do with it. I was swimming with Shandeep in one of our favorite places this summer, and afterwards, when we came out from this fresh water, she asked me later, like, how amazing does our hair feel right now? And it's amazing to feel the minerals that, just by washing in natural waters, how your hair feels. Yes, Preeti saying how to have such healthy, lustrous, thick hair like yours. Okay, I also have to say that this came from my mama. This is also a bit ancestral, so it also came from that. But it may be graying, but it is quite healthy as well. So really playing with some of what you do in your bathing, take a little checklist and notice. Am I actually buying into, because this is what we're often doing, buying into a system that wants to sell me more products. So therefore I'm stripping the body, I'm stripping of it of all its natural oils, I'm introducing chemicals, then I end up having, skin conditions, I have to buy things for that. Notice all the ways in which we're contributing to more waste on the body and on this planet, dependent upon what's in your bathroom. Similarly, if you're using any kind of cosmetics or things like that, noticing. So for the face, many people ask me about bathing with that. And I suggest the Ubtan usage, and then just a gentle oil also on the face. You can do your Abhyanga and then bathe. But if you want to put something on afterwards, this is why at Rasa we created this 3-step system in 4 different types, like for Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and Tridosha, which is just the gentle Ubtan, a botanical toner, which is basically like an amp up of rose water. So it's like, traditionally everybody might have used rose water. What I've done is created different toners with different hydrosols. So with different waters, it might have lavender or neroli or rose, or we have one with chamomile, carrot seed hydrosol, different hydrosols, which are distilled waters from this plant medicine. And that not only freshens the face, and then putting a bit of oil, which is a protection as well, and balancing, but it also actually introduces the next thing, which is natural scents. So let me move to that. So that's one system you can do for the face. I know many of you have other systems, but just check what you're putting onto your body in the way of moisturizers or creams, or, you know, when you start doing Abhyanga, you'll have to use less and less of this. You're going to notice. But after bathing, even dressing is a consideration in Ayurveda. Like, what are we dressing in? What are the kinds of chemicals or things that are used in our clothes? So more and more over the years, there have been more companies that are selling hemp and linen and organic cotton. And I'm so happy to see all these companies, and the fact that even, you know, for us as women, if you're wearing bras or underwear, I'm saying if, because it's not a necessity, just so everybody's aware of this. You know, everything likes to breathe and likes to move. So even, you know, I really suggest for women and men not using anything too restrictive, and especially in the area of the genitals when we're dressing, using things that are as natural as possible. Organic cotton, organic hemp, all of those kinds of things that definitely don't have bleach or dyes in them, and releasing things that have underwires or a lot of spandex around our yonis, around our vaginas. This actually can change a lot of things. You know, if you have chronic yeast infections or pain in the vagina, or if you deal also, if there's any history in your family of breast cancer or various things, that blocks the flow of lymph in through these areas, in through the various sensitive areas of our body. So the way we dress and also what we dress with is something you can consider. And yeah, there are so many beautiful companies now, and I'm sure you all can share some of that. For example, here in Canada, there's a couple resources that I often go to for comfy, more like yoga clothes. So for example, there's a company called Prana. They have a lot of organic cotton and hemp. So I would say about half my clothes are from Prana. There's also Patagonia. So Patagonia is a great company that now uses almost all recycled products or uses natural hemp, organic cottons. I also go to another company, what's it called? Toad, and I'm forgetting. But there's quite a few that are out there, and certain stores. So now I find it quite easy, whether you're getting firsthand or secondhand clothes, to find clothes that are of these natural fibers. So even that is a consideration. And I mean, traditionally we made our own clothes, so that wasn't so difficult. But just take a little checklist. Notice, you know, what you've been wearing. Notice if you're wearing things that are really restricting around the areas, especially the underdressing. Okay, I'm pointing to that as well. And then use of natural scents. So as I said before, these toners that I formulated are not just for the skin, but they also highlight this use of aromatherapy. So just coming to the, yeah, chemical detergents and conditioning clothes is so harmful. Toad & Co, that's what it is, Ida. Yeah, thank you so much. I really like their things as well. I mean, there's many companies, and I'm sure you can all share this. Once I had someone ask to make her a list, because she said, I want to switch, you know, all my clothes. I would like to make a switch. I never made that. I never got to making that list. So maybe we can make one together. And exactly. So the detergents we use on our clothes, all of that, again, especially the areas that it will rub, we're really absorbing all of these things. There's more and more research that's done about autoimmune conditions and all of the chemicals that we have in our homes, but also on our body through our clothing. So, you know, these autoimmune conditions in Ayurveda, they really are a condition of, the way we look at it is often an overload of ama in the system. So the whole system has gone askew because there's been so much ama that's been introduced to the system that it no longer knows how to be in its own naturalness. So as much as we can do to release, you know, both environmental ama and even ama in some of these ways. So like I was saying before, you can make something like your own toner or your own aromatherapy spray. Shandeep makes these amazing crystal mists. I have mine in the bathroom and somewhere else, but she makes mists that are infusing different natural scents and aromatherapy, also with the vibration of various crystals. And so natural scents was always something that was highlighted as a morning practice in Ayurveda. Why? Because each one of these plants and these scents has a very specific resonance. Does it not feel different if you walk in a cedar forest versus a field of lavender? Does it affect your internal state in a different way? And so there's more and more research now and more sort of popularity around the use of essential oils, to the point that maybe some of us are tired of it also. I hear there's a lot of rain and my window's moving. So, but traditionally, these things were used in the form of what is called attars. How many of you have heard of attars before? Or an attar? Some of you, because you've heard this from me before. I'm sure in the Middle East and Egypt, they also had things like this. Maybe Ida knows about this also in Turkey. So these are some traditional attars, which are like essential oils, similar, but they've been distilled, and I have a few different ones here. The labels have since fallen off, so I know from smell. This is amber. This one is rose. And this one is lotus. So this one is a lotus one. Each one of them has a very different vibration and a very different impact. So just as we're, starting our day with our sankalpa, the use of natural scents was always used as a way to firstly ward off pollutants, even in an energetic sphere. Remember last week when I talked about one of the areas of Ayurveda being around possession? Do you remember that? Around the fact that we can be possessed by certain energetics, or we can be possessed by certain things coming into our field. So when we start to use these, this is why smudging, saging, using all those things has been traditionally used in every single tradition. And similarly in Ayurveda, it's almost like we're smudging our system as well. We're using these natural scents to create a certain flavor to our day, to create a certain intention. Rose, has an uplifting kind of floral, light, energizing, not necessarily energizing, but a sweet kind of heartful energy, versus something like amber, which might be more grounding, soothing, calming. Each one of these will create a different sort of ash. It'll create a different echo into our days, but it also creates a protective field around us. So attars were always traditionally used. I got these in South India from a place I love to get them, because I know where they're sourcing from. So these came in, this is like ancient medicine in a new age way, right? So they now come in roll-ons. You never had attars and roll-ons. They came in beautiful, vessels and things. So using some dabs of these, especially on the more absorbing areas. So the inner skin of our arms, the area around the throat and the thyroid, the lower belly, these are all areas that are a little bit more absorbing. And so I would invite all of you to play a little bit with these natural scents. And actually what I was sharing when I was sharing about my own dinacharya, my own morning rituals, is that that's one thing since sharing with all of you that has increased in the last 2 weeks. Like really each morning, turning on my diffusers, using my natural scents again every single morning. I was missing some mornings with that for some reason. It just slipped. So for each of us deciding how we might do that. Or more contemporary is just to use different essential oils. So I have a selection. These are from Young Living, a selection of different, they do both blends and other singles. So what do I have here? Ylang Ylang, Clary Sage, Sage, Stress Away. These are some ones that I'll use both on the body, also in diffusers. But I'm going to give you another tip. Another way you can use natural scents to wake up into the day is to use them on the bottom of your shower. So actually I grabbed the ones I used today on the bottom of my shower, which was a combination of these three: Sage, Stress Away, and Clary Sage. So sage for waking up and stimulating and opening all the channels, and also just it's a very protecting essential oil. Then Stress Away is a wonderful one that has some vanilla, lime. It has some various things. What else does Stress Away have in it? I love this blend actually. I can look to tell you. It's a blend of many things. It also has cedarwood and lavender in it. So a couple drops of that, and Clary Sage for balancing, especially female hormones. So a little bit estrogenic, progesterone balance. So I will put these on the body, but I'll also put a drop or two on the bottom of the shower at the front of the shower. So the steam helps that to enter into the space as well. It's a very easy way, closing the door, to get a gentle steam of all of this entering into your field. So that's a very nice one. Preeti was asking which one to use when and what time of day. It really depends. So that could be a whole day in and of itself, us talking about that. But for now, what I would like you to do, and I will send you all an aromatherapy document so that you're aware of the different aromatherapy that relates to the different doshas, is just to start to feel the effects of if I have this in my space versus this in my space, if I apply just a drop or two of lavender, the simple ones, peppermint, how does that affect me? Because these really are plant medicine, I mean, in a deepest way. So aromatherapy was always used in every single classical holistic medicinal tradition. They were always used because, as we've discussed, and we will discuss more, also this sense of the nose has 10,000 times more acuity than the other five senses. So when we smell things, we're receiving a lot of medicine. So much happens. We access the olfactory bulb, which accesses the brain, which can change what's going on as far as memory and the ways in which we move into our days. So there's so much in the science of aromatherapy. I can't go through all of it now, but so much that we can impact. The way I've made it simple at Rasa is I created these, which are roll-on, basically like attars. We call them sacred essences, which are aromatherapy blends for the doshas. So this is a pitta one, for example. So it's really good when we're dealing with, maybe we're having more agitation, stimulation, we're feeling like, there's intensity, we're feeling a bit more heated. It can be great. I will give this or suggest this for people who are working a lot on the computer or feeling stressed, to just put a dab or two onto the area. This is called Shankha Marma, the acupressure point that really relates to prefrontal cortex, to constantly be thinking and on. Just a drop or two there. It has geranium, peppermint, some other things in it. Is wonderful for helping to balance. We also have a Vata one that I use a lot for insomnia, anxiety. So also creating your own little blends of natural scents. This was something that was always highlighted in Ayurveda. So for those of you, who have been recently seeing all of the phenomena around essential oils and wondering, this actually has an ancient linkage, in all of these traditions. Traditional Chinese medicine, Unani, all of these traditions have used aromatherapy in various ways. Okay, let's come to the last then, the very last of it. After we use our natural scents, it's suggested in Ayurveda that we finish our morning, that we start this morning in that Brahma Muhurta, in that energy. It might seem, we took 3 classes together to go through this. You're like, is this going to take me 8 hours, Tiffany? It really won't. And many of you have probably seen that it condenses in time. But then even before we have our breakfast, to take some time for Vyayama, to take some time for exercise and also spiritual practice. So yoga, any kind of exercise, even if that exercise for you may not be yoga, they would traditionally speak to yoga, because it was not just a physical movement, but it was a physical movement with a prayerful intention. So you're meeting your spirituality together with your movement. And this in Ayurveda was highlighted as medicine in and of itself. Remember, and we will come to that after our break, that part of what was recognized as the definition of health is also the health of our Atma, the health of our soul. So starting our day with healthfulness of the soul was always really important, but also moving this embodiment, that we move in through the body. So I too like to do some HIIT, high intensity interval training. I like to do a little bit of a workout once in a while, depending upon each one of our constitutions. And we'll talk about that later in our time together. We can apply exercise in a way that applies to our dosha, that applies to our constitution. So for example, I don't do long HIIT, I don't do HIIT every single day, but I like to do it occasionally, or it's good for my constitution to do it occasionally. So some exercise was always suggested in the morning. Some pranayama suggested as well. So as simple as breathing deeply. And I've even put here some of the suggestions that Dr. Ladd would often suggest. That for a Vata individual, at least doing 12 alternate nostril breathings. For a Pitta person or someone dealing with a lot of Pitta, doing 16 Pitta or Shitali pranayamas, which we'll talk about later together. This is the cooling breath, where we breathe over the tongue. And for those of us who are Kapha constitution, doing 100 Bhastrika. So Bhastrika is the bellows breath, the fire breath. How many of you have heard or practiced fire breath before? Have you done that before? So this is the one where we're pumping the belly with breath also. So he even gave, if you're going to do it, here's some timings you can do. What I can suggest more than anything is for all of us to get some time to just sit and be with a three-parted breath. And what I mean by that, and you can do it even as I'm explaining it now, is to feel the way in which we can let the incoming breath bring breath into the belly, into the rib cage, and up into the chest. Feel that as I'm saying it. And that as we exhale, exhaling from the mouth, we can exhale from the chest, exhale from the rib cage, and exhale from the belly. And do it once more together. Inhale, inhale through the nose and feel the belly swell, feel the rib cage widen, and feel the chest lift, filling up. And then exhale from the mouth, exhale from chest, exhale from rib cage, and exhale from the belly. Notice just 2 rounds of that. Feel how rested you start to feel. This is what we call three-parted breath, or Maha Yoga Pranayama, the great yogic breath, the great control actually, or direction of prana. When we start doing pranayama every morning, you really, in many ways, start to know how to clear your channels. You clear the subtle channels, not just the physical channels, the nadis, the subtle channels of energy. And you start to really become empowered on how you can channel your prana throughout the day, channel life throughout the day. So it wakes us up and it opens us to a new, fresh day in many ways, and allows us to be more in control of how we want to live energetically into each and every day. I can't highlight pranayama enough. And it was always so beautiful. Dr. Ladd, when I would be in clinic with him in India, he would often instruct, he would say to someone, we would see many, many individuals for free from the communities. And when they came and he would suggest pranayama, he would say, Tiffany, please take them in the other room and do pranayama with them. And it was always so sweet for me to teach, individuals these simple pranayama techniques. And they'd come back a few weeks later and show me how they'd been doing the pranayama and how it works. It's medicine. Yoga and pranayama are deep medicine because they're medicine for the soul. So there's so much more we'll discuss around this at a later time. But this is also considered part of our morning ritual, that we take some time for doing this, even if you take 15 or 20 minutes for yoga. Of course, if you can get more, wonderful. But if you take that time and then you take 5 to 7 minutes even, that's the shortest amount of time, I would say. Not much less than about 5-7 minutes of pranayama, but really taking some time to be with the depth of what it is to be breathed, to be breathed. We take this for granted, that we wake up and we're breathing. We go to bed and we're breathing. Something breathes us. What is it that breathes us, that keeps us alive each and every day? So let that breath deepen and settle and really, really be integrated. A recognition of it in the morning will change so many things. And then some time for meditation, for some quiet contemplation, to sit with ourselves. And 21 minutes, 3 times 7 is an important number. Something happens there. So I'll often suggest to most individuals to take at least 21 minutes. And I have different guided meditations on my website. So what I'll do is I'll post those also for all of you that you can follow if you've never meditated before. And I do hope that at some point we'll also have a 12-week program that we can go together in meditation, an online program. So we can all really be founded in a very simple yet daily sadhana of meditation as well. And then it's time for breakfast. So now you get to eat after 8 hours of morning rituals, right? But sincerely, I have to share that when you get really comfortable with all of this, it usually won't take much longer. Depends on how long you do your yoga for, but it won't take much longer than about an hour and a half with yoga. Like if you're doing some things and you do at least like a half an hour of yoga, you're going to find that this will become a beautiful morning ritual for you if you were to do absolutely everything in its fullness. So any questions about this before we come to take our break? Because this is sort of the conclusion of our 3-parted Dinacharya. Now for this upcoming week, you have more parts to integrate again. And not that you can't ask more questions in the future, but anything that's coming up for anyone right now, anything that's there. Nothing? Okay. So then what we'll do is we'll take a 15-minute break until 11:15, and then we'll come back for the last 45 minutes to look at Sankhya. And then moving forward, we will be moving forward topic by topic in the coming weeks. But it's not that you can't ask me at times with questions about your own dinacharya. I also want to highlight that we will be having one-on-one meetings, but that comes about halfway through our 16 weeks, because I want you to implement some of these things and then be able to come with questions, especially after you've already sort of intimated, as you've already connected to, I think this is my constitution, my prakruti, my vikruti. I want you to be able to check in with me more from that place rather than right at the beginning of our course. So that happens about around the 8th or 9th week. We'll create appointments for that. And Preeti saying Kansawan jade roller can be used on face after applying the oil. Yeah. So after we do face abhyangam, so Shiro abhyangam is the head massage. Mukha abhyangam is face massage. So after, you know, we have different elixirs, which are serums for doing the face abhyanga. It's wonderful to use our Kansa wand, which they just arrived at Rasa. So they should be launched online in the next week or two. So using this for all the points. So as you start to massage with this, what you're doing is you're really helping to drive the oil deeper into the tissues, but you're also, without even knowing it, you're touching many of the marma points, many of the acupressure points that are throughout the face. And many of these acupressure points that are here throughout relate to so many of the organs and the functions of our brain. So if you start to do this, or if you just gently, all of us can do it before we come to break now, you just gently, intuitively start to massage your face. Just massage in different places around the face. Feel how good that feels to let there be a massage throughout. You know, this is what we often do with Mukha Abhyanga. My face is not so oily right now, so it doesn't want to move in the same way. But when you start massaging more intuitively, you can feel how, and if you look at depictions of the marma points, you'll start to see that actually where you're massaging is directly related to many of these acupressure points. So this is a wonderful way after you've massaged. This whole area relates so much to stress, tension, anxiety around the jaw. So massaging into this area, using the Kansa wand here, using it also under the jaw, let alone the cosmetic effects also that it can have. And the Kansa wands have copper also, which helps again to clear and cleanse the skin. It helps to drive, but it also helps to be antimicrobial as well. So it can help if we're having any kind of fungal infections or anything on the skin. Okay, let's take until 17 after, okay? We'll meet then, we'll meet back. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so continuing from where we left off, Ruth Ann has asked a question. I'll just touch on that, and then we're going to shift into this topic around, as I was sharing with you before, the evolutionary aspect of how Ayurveda sees what it is to come into our human form, to be a human being, to be a person. But Ruth Ann asked, does sauna have any role in dinacharya? So actually, sauna, Swedana, as it's termed, is a therapy. It's a treatment in Ayurveda. But the way it was traditionally done, you can all give a little look to this. It's really neat to find this. Swedana is usually traditionally done in a box, in a sweat box that doesn't include your head. So the idea is that your head shouldn't be receiving that excessive heat, your brain, the cerebral brain in your head. So actually there'd be a little protrusion. There's a little area where the head is left out and the rest of the body sweats. And this will often be after Abhyanga. So much of the medicine from the Abhyanga and all of the tissues and the way in which they've been stimulated, everything can be cleared with this Swedana, with this steam as well. So steam, more a steam than a dry sauna, is definitely something that's used. But there are forms of fomentation, forms of heat therapy that use, that are like sauna. Like even traditionally in the text, they would talk about wrapping the body up even in earth or putting hot stones around the body as well to increase some of that heat therapy. So there are various forms of what we call fomentation, of heating, of bringing that heat to especially help to absorb some of the abhyanga, absorb some of the oil into the body. So it's an interesting question. Yeah. I'm hopeful that all of this will really touch your hearts and your beings around Ayurveda, and you'll all in this life get the chance to go for an Ayurvedic treatment. I don't just mean a singular treatment, to be able to go for panchakarma, to be able to go for, a good 4 to 5 week treatment. And beyond that, I also hope that we can do it together sometime. It was so wonderful to go as a group and experience this. And once, all of this settles down, my hope is that I can usually take people for the pilgrimage. The first week of the 3 weeks of the pilgrimage is at a Panchakarma center, my most favorite dear friends in India who have a center in the south. And it's a beautiful place in so many different ways. And my hope is that we can go for even longer than a week there together for those of you who are inspired. Preeti says, you're all so welcome. I often will say, if there's two things that I would love to see every human being have the experience of in this life, one would be a 10-day silent meditation retreat, to have the experience to sit with yourself for 10 days, something happens in that. And the second is at least a 3-week Ayurvedic program, at least a 3-week Panchakarma. I feel both of those will change the course of our lives and change the course really of humanity, how we come together as well. If we could give space for that. Ida says it's heaven. Ida has done both. So Ida has both done, some 10-day retreats and also went to the center that I suggest. So last year when we met each other, and she's writing there, Maitre, it's a beautiful, beautiful center. So it's called Maitre Vedic Village. And I'm hopeful that again with this course, I will invite Dr. Abhilash, the head doctor from there. I will invite him for 1 or 2 of our sessions to come and share with us as well. He's such a beautiful heart and a beautiful friend and being. So you'll also have a bit of contact with him, and he's the head doctor at Maitre Vedic Village. It's the last place I was before all this happened. I actually flew directly from there back to Canada on March 14th. And since that date, they've been closed down. So here's hoping that they can open again soon, because they do amazing work for human beings. Yeah. Okay, so as I shared with all of you, we're going to continue on from where we left off last week with a little bit more of engagement of the foundation of where Ayurveda arises from and what it intends towards, how it considers disease and healthfulness, and how it really considers that each one of us comes into this human form, how it explains that, let's say it in that way, and how by understanding that, we can also understand how to keep this human form, this human embodiment in its most natural state. Really, this is what Ayurveda is helping us to understand. How many of you got a chance to read, or at least read part of that first chapter? Did some of you get a chance for that? Okay, wonderful, really good. Great, okay, and as I said, it's not an absolute requirement, but it might be helpful for some of us to go over that with lightness and enjoyment, not as though, it's a curriculum sort of thing. So last week we left off with Ashtanga Chikitsa, remembering the 8 different limbs in which Ayurveda approaches healthfulness. And what I wanted to remind us of, I mentioned it the first day we were together, but I really wanted to highlight that every Vedic tradition, so whether it's Ayurveda, yoga, meditation, the study of Sanskrit, of sacred dance, of Vastu, sacred alignment, all these different traditions, all these different sort of lineages that arose from the Vedas, no matter how different they may look in their application, they all had one singular intention, which I've already highlighted to you, but I'll highlight again. And that singular intention is encapsulated in an understanding of what is called Purushartham. So actually what I shared with you, that Ashtanga Hridayam, that text, its second chapter is Dinacharya. Do you remember when I was saying that to all of you? So that its second chapter outlines what is called Dinacharya. And I was saying the first chapter talks about what it is, the purpose of this life, what the purpose of this life is. And so we'll see this in almost every classical text and every classical sharing from the Vedic traditions, that at the very beginning, it's very clear that the fulfillment of a human life is the following, and it's what's called Purusha. So Purusha is self or consciousness, and Artham, purpose or fulfillment. What is it to really live into a fulfilled self, a fulfilled life in many ways? And in that first chapter of Ashtanga Hridayam, and at the very beginning, Charaka, in the Charaka Samhita, also goes through this and reminds us that the whole point of Ayurveda is this. And this is a place that I can't highlight enough. I was just reflecting on break, that I think in the future classes, we'll take a break at an hour, and then we'll take a break at 2 hours also, because I'm aware that we're digesting so much during all of this. I'm aware that we might need those little spaces. And the reason I'm stopping to say that is because some of this is so important, but it also confronts within us old conditioned beliefs, old conditioned material that's here. And there can be a lot of work that happens with that. So we're going to take breaks more often, I think will be helpful for us in the future. But I'm just really wanting to highlight the importance of recognizing this, because if we're studying Ayurveda, again and again, I would like to remind you of the depth from which Ayurveda arises. Ayurveda has been in many ways superficialized, like yoga has been superficialized. So I don't know if that's a word, but I'm making it up for now anyways. So it's become, a little bit cresting on the superficies rather than really the depth of what it intended towards. And in Ayurveda, like in classical yoga, Purushartham is the name of the game, really. It's the intention of Ayurveda. So it says the following, that a fully fulfilled life is one that includes these 4 fulfillments, these 4 purposes. And that at the end of our lives, whether the end of our life comes sooner or later, that really it is the goalless goal, we could say it in that way, but that really it should be the ongoing sankalpa of our lives, that we find fullness in these 4 areas, and that actually life in and of itself wants fullness for each one of us in these areas. So we give room for these 4 areas to really come into their fullness. And if we do so, we'll really help to wash away some of our old karmic content that keeps us stagnant in one or another of these areas. That as we start to work on these areas, that we'll actually see that much of our past karma, many of the samskaras that keep us in dis-ease, that keep us ill, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, wherever that dis-ease might be, relationally, various ways in which those diseases can pervade our lives. That if we have our eye, we have the eye of the heart on these 4 fulfillments, we can start to see a whole change of the way in which we come into this life, and a real enlightened life, an embodied enlightenment, in which the life starts to become liberated in all fields. So what are these 4? The first is what is called artha. So I really suggest to you, when I say these Sanskrit words, if you feel to, you can repeat them. So the entirety of this is called Purushartham. Purushartham. Each one of these is a mantra in and of itself. So saying it is powerful. So the first is artha, and artha really means right livelihood. That each of us is able to anchor into a right livelihood in this life, that we find something that really helps us to feel, connected to sustenance, to sustainability, but in a way that feels that feels aligned. So how can we really determine that for another being, right? That's something that each one of us needs to contemplate. Right livelihood is right for you. Each one of us has to find our rightness in our livelihood. The studies I went through and was later on my way to do my master's and my PhD, it all got stopped because I found yoga, and I got, basically catapulted to India very quickly. And in that moment, I decided not to continue in those studies. And later I saw a great astrologer, and he said to me, the thing that you studied, you will never work in again, ever. And I had so much passion, so much love for it, which was, I studied development studies. So working for NGOs as a development practitioner and organizing and things like that. So I loved it from the beginning, working, in the Amazon of Ecuador, and working in northern India, and working with Mexican migrant workers here in Canada, and various ways in which this was starting to fill my heart. And yet that right livelihood was very clearly clarified. So for some of us, it takes some time for that to be clarified, but some of us are living in a livelihood that, yes, might provide sustenance, but doesn't feel quite right, or something that feels right, sort of right, but doesn't provide sustenance. When can the 2 meet, or how can we have the 2 meeting so that really is right sustenance? So when we say livelihood, I also want to say right sustenance, that we feel like our needs are taken care of, and that we're able to take care of the needs of those around us. Those who need to be taken care of can be taken care of, whether it's our family, our partners, whether or not it's those also, because in almost every culture, including that of Ayurveda and the Vedas, it was important to also be able to give of dana, to give of generosity, to give of donation to those who need it. How beautiful does it feel? How medicinal does it feel to be able to give? Actually, in the Vedas, they talk about 5 forms of medicine. And one of those 5 forms is dana, is generosity, is donation. They say that that is medicine in and of itself. The others include mantra, and they include yoga, etc. We'll look at those another time. Homa, which is fire ritual as well, puja. But dana is one of these 5. And that was very surprising to me the first time I learned this, actually, What medicine is it of us to be in our own right livelihood so we can take care, we can sustain, but we can also sustain all those around us, or sustain what needs to be sustained so we can sustain also of this earth. So arta is very important, and each one of us has our own contemplation in our lives around this, right? So that's the first. The second is kama, right pleasure or right desire, as it's sometimes translated. So this one is a very interesting one, because oftentimes what I've noticed is that not just in Vedic spiritual traditions, whether that's yoga, meditation, Hinduism, Ayurveda, or in other traditions, somehow there's this demonizing of pleasure, as though, have you noticed that for yourself? As though like pleasure or desire is something to avert from, to stay away from. So I don't know how many of you have experienced the seesawing with it. And the reason why that probably is there for all of us is because a lot of our lives previous to that, a lot of our autopilot lives are just in the pursuit of pleasure, right? Pursuit of pleasure and denial of pain. This is one of the age-old adages that's understood in every single tradition, including in the Buddhist tradition, in the Christian tradition, in Judaism. Every tradition focuses or brings awareness to the fact that an unlived, an unfulfilled life is one in which we're just constantly oscillating between pleasure and pain, just constantly craving for more or averting from other things. So in that way, of course, awareness needs to come to this. Our life can't just be directed by constant pleasure seeking, by constant desirous fulfillment, nor does that ever work, right? This is when we have a constant addictive loop in which the neurotransmitters of our system, whether it's physiological addiction or it's behavioral addiction, so substance or behavioral addiction, we'll just need a bigger and greater hit constantly, right? So we all know this. We all have from small to great addictions within our lives. Actually, as long as we're still addicted to this craving and averting mind, we will always be addicted either to a substance or a behavior. We'll self-medicate in one way or another. We'll think that our happiness is determined by what our mind is saying we need to avoid or we need to hook onto, we need to grasp. How many of you have noticed that? When your mind becomes more neutralized in that way, that you notice that actually pleasure of its own accord can arise, just natural, simple pleasure, without necessarily needing to create pleasureful experiencing. You see, the first time we taste a strawberry, what is it like for each one of us? You know, you watch a child's face the first time they taste a strawberry, or the first time that they're introduced to a new experience. This weekend, I was sharing with you about these children, and there was so much for me to learn, and many of you have children, so you've already learned so much of those lessons. But I love being with little beings to see their awestruck nature, the way in which for them pleasure can be known in such simple ways, such subtle ways. I was sitting with one of the two boys, and he has this newfound love for hummus. And so for him, hummus was not like you dip something in it. It was like you take a spoon and you eat hummus in this way, you know? And I was watching his face as he was eating just spoonfuls of hummus in that way that just arose naturally for him. He wasn't conditioned to think you have to dip something in the hummus or it's a dip only, just eating in that way. And the wide-eyed kind of pleasure of all the flavors of that. So right pleasure in many ways comes when we can actually get pleasure from the simple things in life. When there's a simple pleasure from walking on the earth, when there's great pleasure in the simplicity of sitting with another being that we feel deeply nourished by, when there's the pleasure of waking up in the gentle light of the morning and feeling the pleasure of that. So this is what Ayurveda and the Vedic tradition was speaking to when they were speaking of Purushartham, that we start to come to a right pleasure, a kama, in which we can truly be in joy. We can truly be in the enjoyment of our lives in simple ways, not in these addictive heightened ways where we're constantly needing to up the ante, but rather we can live lightly and empty things out to a point where actually we find that there is a certain eminence of pleasure, a certain illumination of pleasure, that is an enjoyment that's found in the simple things. And actually, you'll notice the more the body and the system and the mind comes into ease, the more these simple things become very pleasurable. You know, I was with Matthew and I were at a reservation that's nearby here recently, and they were selling these mugs. And we were laughing a bit because I had so much pleasure seeing the fact that this artist, who I love, who's a beautiful Canadian artist, her artwork had been printed on these mugs. And every day when I'm drinking from, I didn't buy just one, I bought 4. So maybe that was my craving for more. But every day, the different energetics that are offered from these mugs, and just drinking from this and seeing this art, there's like this simple sense of connection and aliveness that happens with that. And each one of us may have our own ways in which we can have our simple joys in life. But if the mug wasn't here, if the mug smashed, I would be disappointed. But if the mug wasn't here, and this is the whole contemplation, the question, would I not be able to enjoy? Would there be a lack of pleasure? And that's the ultimate question, actually, in almost every tradition, is that there not be a necessity that these things be here for our happiness. And nevertheless, that when they are, or when things are occurring in their own natural state, in their own natural movement in our lives, that we can have a deep appreciation. And what that requires, of course, is intimacy with life. When we're deeply intimate with life, when things slow down, we're going to find that it's like tasting a strawberry for the first time. Because what happens, children are constantly asking, why, but why, but why, but what, but when, why? There's an open awareness in which it's like they're experiencing things anew for the first time each time. And that means that everything tastes like it's the first time. So all of what we've been even touching into thus far with these morning rituals, you might have been noticing it. You see colors differently, you taste things differently, you have more appreciation for these simple things, whether it's art or other things that really touch your heart. On the break, I was just sitting for a moment with one of these attars and remembering where I received it from and smelling it. And there was a simplicity to the pleasure of that. And I was remembering the being who was sharing the gift of attar with me and who was selling these. And, there's simple ways in which we can have deep enjoyment in our lives. But in our current lives, in our contemporary lives, we've veiled so much of that with this ongoing seeking. And just the rapidity of our lives. It means that we can't really taste or stop to smell the flowers, taste the waters, really be in that spaciousness of life. So kama, right pleasure, can be a huge inquiry for all of us. Neither denying enjoyment, because there can be so much fear of enjoyment as though it's going to be an entrapment, nor needing anything specifically in our lives to feel the natural joy that lives as our very own hearts. How can we, hold someplace in the middle, which is called Madhyama Marga, to be in that middle path in which neither is no longer the game of the way in which our lives are directed. So this is a huge fulfillment that may require a lot of inquiry for each and every one of us. Then the third of Purushartham is Dharma, right purpose. And what Dharma actually means, it comes from the root D, which means to sustain or uphold, to be sustained or upheld. So oftentimes when people hear Dharma, they think it's the purpose of their lives. Like, what's my purpose on this planet? And we get a little bit self-centered in this. What I mean by that is we think like, oh, I have to have a great purpose and it has to be something that my mind has thought of and then that I animate, that I bring into life. But actually what Dharma really means is that we come to the deepest purpose of all of our lives, which is knowing ourselves, like intimately knowing what it is to be alive. That's the greatest purpose. And then there is something that is called Swadharma, so SVA, Swadharma, which means our individual purpose. So in knowing what it is, knowing the purpose of life, which really means settling into the current of life, settling into the flow of life, is the greatest Dharma. To be okay with the river of life, to be in full acceptance of life as it moves. Swadharma means to feel myself as that one which is carried also in this river, to know what it is or to sense what it is that I'm being asked, how I'm being asked to contribute. And sometimes that contribution, the mind gets in the way of it. Some of us might think that that contribution has to look one way or another, but some of us, that contribution is happening moment to moment in the simplest ways, in ways that we're not even recognizing actually. Some of us think that contribution has to happen in public in one way, or we have to do, things that are deemed great by our contemporary culture. But actually, each one of us has our own placement in this river of life. And what it really means, Swadharma, is to be settled into ourselves, to be settled into the purpose of our lives, like really to be settled into the current, that life does this at one point and it does that at another point, and we're not struggling and fighting and trying to swim upstream, but rather we can really, really, in many ways, surrender. There can be this great vairagya to really not be in sort of an antithesis to life's clear guruship. What I mean by that is so often we're given clear lessons. There's a clear teacher that's offered at any given moment. And how often do we fight against that purposefulness? Life is purposefully showing us things. The great Dharma is purposefully sustaining and upholding us in a specific way. And do we relinquish to that? Are we able to soften into that as part and parcel of this totality? Or do we want something different based upon the conditioning of our lives? And that fighting against is usually what creates the greatest suffering in our lives. The trying to move in a different way, the having a concept that life has to look in one way or another. So great Dharma and coming into great inquiry of Dharma is really this capacity to be in a surrendered presence with life's hand. You know, at any time to feel like we're cradled, the great D, the great upholding, the great sustenance. I am cradled, even in this shitty circumstance that might be happening here or here, even in this thing that feels like it must be so wrong for my life. Can I see the right purpose in it? And that's huge. And it's a much deeper understanding than Dharma is often understood. Dharma is also often understood from the personal mind as I have to have some great purpose in life. I have to, you know, create some goal, 5-year goal, 10-year goal, 15-year goal. This is a very superficial understanding of Dharma, very superficial. What is the right purpose of this life that brings me to my knees to recognize what it is to be alive and to recognize also what it is to be alive in this specific way? Each one of us is alive also in the, let's say, in the singularity of self. The same one self-consciousness pours through all of us, but each one of us, and Ayurveda says this very clearly, is also born in a very clear individuation. We have our own individual form. We have our own human embodiment, and it's called, for one reason or another, in this right purpose, to be part of the mosaic of what it is to be in this life. We all have our place here. And there's a great purpose for why you are going through the specific things in your life at this time and later times. We never planned for it, right? There's that beautiful quote from, who was it from? Thomas Harding? I'm trying to remember, who said, you make a plan and God laughs. I think that's been uptaken by many different people, but really, truly, right? We think we know our Dharma. What's the great Dharma that's constantly upholding and sustaining you? And then lastly, the Purushartham, the great intention, the great sankalpa of this life, according to the Vedic tradition and most traditions, is liberation. That we be free of this constant cyclical suffering, that we be free of the personal framework that has all of its conditioned samskaras, all of its tendencies that it's been born with, which are part of the right purpose, actually, that they be seen and that they be there, but eventually that they're seen to a point in which there's a transcendence of that. So it's not a disengagement from that. Liberation isn't like I disengage and deny and repress. It's just that we've worked through, there's been a working through, or there's been a living through in which there's finally an opening to a great transparency. And this might be known in small ways in our lives, and it might be eventually known in great ways in which there's an equalizing, we could say. We live in a persistent state of freedom. It's not that things don't occur and that we aren't, you know, engaged with life in its fullness, but that there isn't a clinging nor a real suffering at the hands of things that occur to us in our lives or that are occurring, let's say it in that way. There's more and more of this surrendered trustfulness as we move through. And this is the ultimate liberation, the ultimate freedom to see things in their right perspective, to see that we are ultimately this one singular self, to see ultimately that we will in this very life pass from this bodily and mental form, and that everything is impermanent. And in that way also to recognize the one singular truth, the permanency only of our souls, of whatever we might call it, the self, this pure consciousness, that remains consistently untouched. So liberation has been given so many different concepts, ideas, and I would say for each and every one of us, self-inquiry is the only true thing that can bring us into a direct experiencing of what liberation truly tastes like for each of us in our own human embodiment. Even that might taste very differently. There'll be a little bit of a pouring through the way in which it pours through the pores of this uniqueness. And that liberated state could look very different. Swami Shivananda, it was said, that he was such a great being of yoga, and he brought yoga onto this planet in beautiful ways. But even until the end, Swami Shivananda was quite a jokester in many ways. He would play in different ways. Neem Karoli Baba, similarly. Neem Karoli Baba, he loved sweets. He was the teacher of Ramdas. He loved sweets. He would eat a kilo sometimes of Indian sweets, at a time, and like transmute these things. And yet, if he didn't have any food at times when they, no food was coming or they were pilgrimaging, there was no differentiation in his internal state. He was happy and joyful and playful either way, a certain liberation and yet an engagement. There are other great beings or great masters, that were known to be much more contemplative, a little bit more serious or intense, or who spent their time, more in cave dwelling. Great Christian saints, for example, like Saint Teresa of Avila, the way in which it poured through her heart, so different in her sort of feminine connection to the beloved and to God. So each being in their own liberation in moksha will look also slightly different. And I think there's a lot of concept around what this word means. But in the Vedic tradition, they said a fulfilled life, a fully fulfilled life, a fully fulfilled coming home to ourself is an encompassing of these 4 areas. And Ayurveda intends towards this. So as we come to the depths of Ayurveda, this is the intention, that Ayurveda will truly allow us to discover what it is for each and every one of us to have artha, kama, dharma, and moksha in this very life. Oftentimes we'll say jokingly, next life. No, Ayurveda says now, not even this life. Why? What about now? If we were to come into truthful seeing, what about now? This very moment, it's possible for us to have that, because it is our very nature, actually. It is our very essence to have this available to each one of us. So I'm going to let that sit with each of us just for more contemplation, to let that be there. And you might come again and again. I might even suggest to all of you in your notebooks or separately to have, a couple pages for each one of these areas of your life, to come to contemplations throughout your days around right sustenance or around right pleasure, to notice when, you're kind of seesawing, or notice the places in your own life that are a little bit less than fulfilled. Usually what I find for each one of us is, depending upon our samskaras, there may be one of these areas that is a little bit lacking, or let's say more than that, that is our specific area to be taught through. So some of us might have challenge in right sustenance. What is it there that we need to really look at, not, move away from? Or some of us may have challenge with dharma, with right purposefulness, with really seeing the purpose of this life or engaging with it. So just see for yourself, see how you can be in a lived engagement with these 4 in the coming weeks that we're together and for our lives. So from that, how does Ayurveda then consider deep health? If the purpose of our lives is Purushartham, how does it see what it is for a human being to be in what's called swasta? So everybody say this, swasta. The V in Sanskrit is a bit like a soft W, swasta. It's not a svasta and it's not swasta. It's a bit like swasta. It has a bit of a soft sound. So you can make it a W if that helps for you, okay? And it means health. So swa means my own self, my own. And sta means to be situated. So health actually in Ayurveda means to be situated in my own self, like to be situated in Purushartham, to be fulfilled in myself. And what does that mean? So from the greatest Vedic perspective, the cure for any primary cause of suffering is that we really have to look at avidya, look at our ignorances, and our separation consciousness, our ahamkara, our ego, to really look to those places. Because if we don't recognize them, it's very difficult for us to be situated in ourselves. They will create so many veils. So avidya is a term I'll come to again and again. It's one of the primary, what we call kleshas, the primary obstacles to our own liberation, is that we know better, but we continue to live in a veiled place in our ignorances. And it causes again and again suffering. And that we live those because we want to uphold and keep sustained a very specific personal structure, a very specific personal ego. So the greatest medicine, the greatest recognition of health happens when we start to see that those two are the cause of suffering and what we might do. around those. And we're going to talk about those a little more in a couple minutes. And the definition of swasta, according to Sushruta, so this is both in the Charaka Samhita, as I showed you last week, and the Sushruta Samhita, they very clearly describe the following. So in Sanskrit, it's the following offering. Sam dosha, sam agni, chasama dhatu, malakriya. Prasana atma, indriya mana, swasta iti, abhidhyate. So what does this mean when we translate it into English? Okay, from this very clear sutra. One who is established in themselves, who has balanced doshas, so the balanced constitution, the primary life force or life energies, who has a balanced agni, digestion, who has properly formed tissues, a proper elimination of waste, well-functioning bodily processes. And this is the important part. So it's saying basically all those things, when there's balance in all those levels, in our digestion, in our constitution, in our tissues, as well as we're releasing waste. But when one whose mind, soul, and senses are full of bliss, that's a healthy person. So this one is really important because it's the only medicine I know on the planet who really points to this, whose mind, soul, and senses are full of bliss. So most holistic medicinal traditions will say, different parts of the body need to be balanced. And that's very important. It's beautiful for us to know this according to Ayurveda. And we'll touch on all of these: digestive fire, mala, the tissues, doshas. We're going to touch on all of that in our time together. So it says the body in general needs to be full of bliss. But what about the mind, the soul, and the senses being full of bliss? It's the only tradition I know, also the only medical system that really points to the senses and the soul needing to be full of bliss. Atma, that the Atma is full of bliss, that one is truly healthful if they're an emanation, if they have a settlement into their own soul as Ananda, as bliss, and that their senses are also full of bliss. And we're going to recognize why this is. I mean, all of you can already feel it. Like, if my soul is alive with bliss, what does that do for the health of every other level of my being? But the senses is a very interesting one. And we will speak to it more and more. I have gently touched on it to remind you that each one of the senses, it is a literal ingestion organ for the 5 elements. And it's our way of staying interconnected to all of life. And it's one of the causes of disease, actually, according to Ayurveda, is if the 5 senses are not balanced. So this is a powerful recognition of what health is. If you look to the WHO, I don't have it here. It's mostly the body, and only some years ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago, they included the mind, if you can even believe that. Right? So for a long time, it was just about healthfulness of the body, that the body be mostly healthful. And this helps us understand why allopathy, also why Western medicine has become much more symptomatic, because really what allopathy is pointing to is just the physical absence of disease. How do we just make the physical body absent of disease? Then we're in health. Whereas Ayurveda and also other holistic medicinal approaches really point to the fact, no, this is a holism. There needs to be a holism in this healthfulness. This needs to emanate from every part of what it is to be a human being. And we are not just a physicality. We are all of these layers of being. So our energy needs to be balanced. That's what the doshas are. Our mind needs to be full of bliss. Our senses also need to be harmonized. And our Atma, our soul, the very drop of the ocean of pure consciousness, that too needs to be free within us. Yogananda, one of the greatest early yogis to make his way to North America, offered the following. He said very simply, ignorance is the supreme disease. And we're going to understand more about this next week, because we're going to talk about the causes of disease and understand that avidya, that living by ignorance, consistently means that we live by patterned behaviors that will usually impress or bring an impression into the body, mind, and also into our hearts. Diseased kind of conditioned behavior. So ignorance is the supreme disease. And in the Charaka Samhita, Charaka offered, health is known as happiness, while disorder is unhappiness. He was quite simple in saying this. Like, when I'll ask this question, what is health? People are like, well, and we try to give a lot of concepts to it, right? So even if you were to ask yourself that question right now, like, how do you know when you're healthy? And then we look at it and we might say, well, I'm not diseased. There's not a this or not. It's almost in what we would call
like in Latin, what's called like a via negativa, like when there's the absence of something. But actually, health in and of itself is known because it is. So all of us knows when we're healthy because we are. It's like it's our very birthright to be in that sort of stabilized state, well-rounded, holistic blissfulness, we could say. And not bliss like some kind of reached, ephemeral, temporary state, but bliss as this gentle joy that pervades every area of our being. So in Ayurveda, we use this word quite often, which is called prakruti, or what means nature. And we'll touch on that more next week when we're together. We'll talk about that more together, prakruti or nature. But Ayurveda really, in many ways, is exploring what is it, to be in our nature. So what is our nature? And what is this embodiment? What is naturalness or ease? And what is perfect health? And we're going to come to those questions again and again. And I would even suggest to you to have those, up somewhere for yourself. Like, what is my nature? What does it mean to be as my nature intended? What is it to be in an embodiment? Many of us have not had the opportunity to question that. We've just taken it for granted. It's not something that in our cultures we've sat down with, our parents or in our schools to say like, oh, what is this human body? Yes, we study anatomy, physiology, we study biology, all of these things. But were we ever really brought to contemplation of what is it to be in this human form? Where did we come from? The great questions, as they're known in almost every tradition, the inquiry of the self. What is it to somehow have this ever-changing field of a body and also of a mind, but that there's someone who watches all of that changing? Who is that one? What is it to be as my nature? What is this embodiment? And what is naturalness or ease? And what is perfect health, or what is health? What is it to be in health? Even I would add to this, what is disease? What is dis-ease? These can be great inquiries that just those alone can help to reorient our lives and reorient the ways in which we connect to our lives and we connect to our nature. The way in which Ayurveda and the Vedic tradition explains the theory of evolution or involution is through Samkhya. How many of you read about Samkhya in your textbooks? How many of you got the chance to read from that? I just want to check. Some of you did, not all of you. Okay, so what I want to do is I would like everyone to be able to read from that. And then next week, we're going to go more deeply into this because it really requires some, for us to really be open to it. Also, it's the end of our day today. So I don't want to start this new topic because I would like for it to really be deeply digested. So we'll start with freshness when we meet together next week. But Samkhya, what it really is, and I want you to think about this while you're reading it, is it's not a theory really of, it's not a theory firstly, but it's a recognition not of evolution, but of involution. And what I mean by that is it helps us understand as human beings how we can come back to the seed and the seat of ourselves. How we might have gone outwards, we might have got directed outwards and became sort of derived and funneled outwards. And there might have been a lot of conditioned derivatives of how we come into this embodiment. And that might have become quite complex for a lot of us, and thus a lot of suffering. But when we deeply understand Samkhya, which is the philosophical evolutionary understanding that is the backbone of Ayurveda, when we deeply understand it, we can understand what it is to get wholly involved in and as ourselves, to involve, to come home to ourselves. Ramana Maharishi, the great master and being and great enlightened one of Atma Vichara, of self-inquiry and Advaita, of non-duality, he said, come back, go back the way you came, go back the way you came. So whenever people would be asking all sorts of questions, but I'm this kind of person and this is happening in my life and that's happening and how do I solve this and what do I do with this, and coming with all these questions, his great satsang, his great reminder constantly was, go back the way you came. Go back to the sense of I exist, to that pure sensation of existence. See what's found there. So Samkhya can help us to understand why it is that we've come out into all these forms and the seeming complexity, and why we have all of these various things that happen in our lives and that cause us stress and strife and suffering and all of those various things. But really how when we start to understand that, we can start to take that back to its source. How we moved from source into individuation, which is a beautiful recognition of Sankhya, how we've become all these different unique contributions of diversity on this planet and at this time, but also how in that diversity, we can also come home to our own simplicity of oneness, come home to our own simplicity of singularity, how things can be more simple in many ways. And we'll continue with that next week, especially with the understanding, or especially with that background of these questions, like what is our nature? How is it that we became embodied according to Ayurveda? And what is it to be in health according to Ayurveda? And Sankhya has much, much, much to explain to us about that, to help us to understand about that. So make sure you go through that and you get more time to touch into that. And next week, after we've touched on that, we will move into speaking about the Mahabhutas, our great elements, which will help. It's like we're forming a great puzzle with all of this. We're bringing all the pieces together. I'm seeing Marissa's dog. So sweet. Yes, some of you are sharing that so much is arising for you in the sharing of this. And this is the hope that as we sit together, much will arise in each one of your own contemplative spaces. We may not always have the space to share it all together. Next week, what we will do is we'll take a longer time for dyad at the beginning, where you can share some of the contemplations about the things we've discussed in the second half of our class today around, you know, the purposefulness of our lives, the Purushartham, also around these great questions of Ayurveda. And any great gathering of Sangha and any great satsang, any great river of truth should really do that. What it should do more than anything is not wake up your mind to content, but rather wake up your heart to yourself. Like really, you should feel like there's this ongoing tasting of contemplation that enters your life from our times together. So if you're noticing it at any time, you're trying to grasp and grip and write things down so much that you can't just be in this heartful presencing of things, maybe stop for a minute or two. You have the recordings, you can come back to them. You have the slides as well. I'm not saying that it's not wonderful to also write and take some of these things down, but notice if you can have a combination in which the mind is also in many ways untethered of some of its old conditionings, and the heart is revealed to a spaciousness that then can set a certain flavor as we move into the rest of our week together, in which Ayurveda can really be revealed to us, to each one of our unique lives. Does that resonate for you? Do you understand what I mean as I say that, any of you? Yeah, okay. So we're going to conclude for today, but what I would love to do is for all of us to just come off mute and just share a word or two about what's here for you. Maybe not tons of sentences, but a word or two, just an expression of anything you would like to share that's there for you for a couple minutes. So if you all want to take yourselves off mute. If I say your name and you don't want to share, that's okay as well. You can just say pass for now. So let's start firstly with Lisa Goodwin.
It's a little overwhelming at this point, I think. It was a lot, but I'm feeling more grounded, I guess. And I'm excited for what's coming.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. The trees behind you are so beautiful also. Okay, let's come to Mary Christine.
Yes, hi. So the words that comes in my mind is profound, and it kind of reminds me some stuff that we talk about in my teacher training, like a few years back ago, and it's just sometimes some stuff that I put aside or didn't come back to see again in a more profound way, and it's just it's just light up something inside. So. Yes, thank you.
Let's come to Jess now.
I think the biggest kind of shift was when you were sharing that definition of health for me, of thinking not only of like all the other aspects of mind, soul, and senses, but that it's bliss, that it's not just like being okay or being that it's, I really like that. And I think it makes me look at health in a whole new way.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you. Sequoia?
Well, a number of years ago, I attended a very intense retreat. And
Yes.
at one point, I was looking at a tree and I was thinking, you know, the purpose of that tree is to be a tree. And so I took from that the purpose of Sequoia is to be Sequoia, that no matter what I do, as long as I do it with authenticity and honesty and integrity, that and compassion, that that I'm being who I am. That so I think that this course is just helping me to guide me into being more like Sequoia, more authentic, to letting that come out and to be who I really am. So
Oh, thank you, Sequoia. Thank you so much. Marissa? Oh, she said, I have some background noise. The biggest shift is what you were just saying about less content, more being present, and really rooting into what's surfacing during the transitional time. Thanks for the reminder. Thank you, Marissa. And Anna?
Okay, for me, I'm like Jessica, who said that about, you know, having the full senses and having the bliss, and that's what creates a healthy person. And I'm thinking, with all the things that we discussed, how really understanding Ayurveda contributes in that you're responsible for your own health.
Yes, thank you, Anna. Thank you so much. Mary?
Sorry, I had to move rooms. For me, a lot of what's come up for me is the realization of the root of how disconnected people are these days, which is something that's really been affecting me like emotionally and mentally. And it really rang true when we were kind of talking about coming back to the root and how we're all kind of like branching out into all these different things that we like to label ourselves and define ourselves by these certain titles and stuff like that. When really the most important thing that we can do to kind of realize who we are truly instead of labeling ourselves of all these branches is to come back up to the top one truth of we're just here, we're beings, we're alive, and I'm just excited to explore that more.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. Ida, if you're there, honey. Okay, let's come to, oh, hers not great. Okay, we love you, Ida. Matthew? You have to unmute. There we go.
Yeah, thanks. Apologies, I had to nip out because I had an urgent phone call. So what was the question?
Just any reflection that's here at the end of our day together. Really, that's what it was. Anything that's coming up from especially this last portion.
Yeah, it was around the alignment. I think the purpose seemed to be around the alignment and surrender to that, really. Yeah. So rather than trying to look for something, it was just that broad letting go, not fighting.
Thank you, Matt. Shanti?
I was really touched by all the teachings and especially the Purushartham. Always a beautiful reminder of refocusing on how to see my life from the greater perspective, especially when things get a little bumpy on the road. Like, yeah, it's all part of it. So it's helping me to just gain clarity and to keep focusing on the bliss of living deeper into the presence. I loved how you talked about simple living and enjoying the simple pleasures, which is something I like to cultivate, just like the sun beaming on my face all of a sudden.
Oh, thank you, Shandeep, and also welcome. We're glad you can join us this third one. I'm noticing some are just able to join now, so you might be, some of you have been on the whole time, might be seeing that some are coming on. So welcome, Shandeep, also. Rue?
Yeah, I feel like that it's this seed. It's like just scarifying. The layers are coming off and it's starting to grow. I just feel like, yes, I've read some of this before, but I'm taking a much richer understanding of it. And it's really lovely.
Thank you, Ruthann. And Preeti?
Tiffany, for me, it's like a lot of thing is arising, but not to take a lot of time of any one of you. But I'm actually going through a confrontation because I'm doing this course with you, especially and it's making me one question which is coming back to me again and again, and reminded to me by others around me that especially an Indian doing a course with someone outside for. And I was kind of thinking that why I chose you. I mean, why I chose to do this course at all, and why to do this way where I don't know people, and I'm also observing that you know I'm reaffirming every time I'm typing something, every time I'm asking something. It's more of not question, but it's like like I'm trying to give an affirmation to my own self. So just to mention one thing, like I think my always been my confrontation in India learning Ayurveda, because most of the Vaidyas and the senior doctors are happen to be a male.
Yes.
And as a woman, I think I'm fighting a patriarchal figure in my own life. And though they've been great teachers, and I have huge respect for all of them, but somehow I could not get away with this patriarchal image in my life. So I could never learn from any one of them, because I saw in all of them this figure emerging again and again. And I don't know how to say these things to people here. But yeah, every time I'm seeing you in this class, even if it's online, and it's affirming something, that why it is so much easy with you, and why it was so difficult when everything was so easy in my surrounding. So I'm so grateful to you. Thank you so much. And for giving me this space, and to all of you. And I'm sorry if I'm taking any space. I don't want to hijack the class, but I'm so grateful to be so kind to me. And yeah, I'm really, really grateful. Yeah.
Thank you, Preeti. I'm also really grateful for some of the things Preeti just even shared now. I'm also grateful for your humility to come to a class where, yes, somehow in this embodiment, I seem to be white, very white. This is how karma and destiny and all of these things work. But it's very humble for, and I want to say that to the entire group, for someone who has already a background in Ayurveda and is Indian, to also come here and know that actually we're beyond all of these things. And I have quite a few actually Indian students and friends, and we all to really be able in our humility to see that we can learn something from each other, even just the way in which Preeti is able to contribute with her own background knowledge, and each one of you coming from different places. So I'm also grateful for that share, Preeti, and I'm grateful for each and every one of you. And I don't feel anyone is hijacking. Please ask your questions, put them. We'll continue to give as much space as we can for the various questions. It's what allows this to be alive to your own lives. So that needs to be there from all of us. Okay, so for this next week, really make sure that whole first chapter is finished, okay? And that you read on Sankhya, start to implement the last parts, the last third of the Dinacharya, and we'll meet together again next Wednesday at this time. Let's conclude together with a prayer. So inviting you to sit up nice and straight, bring the hands to heart. This beautiful prayer we've chanted before that really, really recognizes our completeness, our oneness, our wholeness, and that we are this very essence of being. So you can chant after me. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Settling there just for a moment. May this prayer and all that's been shared today and all the days we come together, may it bring us into a recognition that there's nothing that ought to be done. May it instead bring us home to our effortlessness of being as health, being as naturalness. May it welcome us and invite us into a life that is aligned with that, so we can really live into our fulfillment in this form at this time, so that we can know ourselves deeply, and so that goodness, kindness, the great love, and the dwelling place of peace, our very own hearts, can be free and bring freedom to all those around us. Namaste. Thank you very much to each and every one of you, and see you next Wednesday. You can come off mute if you want to say bye to each other, to the Sangha, or dance, or shout, or do whatever.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Hello, Matt. Goodbye. Thank you, Tiffany.
Bye, all.
Thank you.
So beautiful.